So here we are with Harry Powell from the All About Balance podcast. How are we doing, my friend? So before we
Hello,
get
sir.
stuck in, tattoos, we
Yeah,
just got to start chatting about
yeah,
that off air.
yeah,
Most painful tattoos, which one, like sort of, out of all the ones you've got, let's do a sort of stack rank,
yeah.
sort of like tier
All
list.
right.
What's the most
Yep.
painful one you got versus the least painful one you got?
So we'll start at the easy one. So the least painful one was the outside of my leg. I'll whip it out for the camera. So I've got identical tattoos essentially. So I have this side of my leg done.
So the outside of the calf,
For
everyone
anyone
listening. Yeah.
So that's the left hand side of my calf. It's not the back of the calf. It's the left hand side of my leg. So those were long sessions. They were 10 and 12-hour sessions back to back. So I did one on a Wednesday, one on a Thursday. But they were relatively painless, to be honest. I fell asleep through one of them, so they were relatively painless, not too bad at all. The worst one was my chest. So the story of that is a little bit weird, I guess. I went to Moscow to go and get tattooed by this gentleman called Ben Klebesky, and we started a little bit late. I think we started at like 9 p.m., something like that. So by that time, for anyone that's had a tattoo, you'll know that you've got to be well liquidated, well hydrated. You've got to have eaten well, and then have your sugars high and all that sort of stuff. So by 9 p.m. I was definitely not either of those things. And Ben is quite quick in his work. Like, he finished this piece in 6 hours, which is, for the level of color and shading and stuff, is pretty incredible. But the middle of my chest, sort of the sternum area, took about 2 hours, and it's the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. I've broken lots of bones. I've had lots of injuries, but that was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. It was absolutely disgusting.
Now, oh god, that kind of like grinding, because again, it's like, I think the common theme is like, the closer to like the bone you get, the more like sensitive and the worse it seems to get. Now, regards to like recovering back to training from all these tattoos you've had, like, what is the usual turnaround from? Okay, so like, for example, I've got mine done to my calf. My sort of, reads one Jordan Peterson book, and there we are. He's got a tattoo, so he's one of those guys. Anyway, but anyway, so you get a tattoo done. What's the turnover from back to rolling? Because again, other sports you can kind of get away with it, but what's your sort of transition time from off the chair to on the mats again?
So it depends, right? So for bigger pieces, for the bigger pieces that I've had, generally the turnaround is about 2 weeks. And it's about 2 weeks because they will use either something called Dermalese, which is like a recovery sort of film, or the tattoo artists that I've been to use something called second skin. So second skin is essentially like sticky back plastic, and it goes over the tattoo, and you have it for 24 hours. You then take it off in the shower. You then put another one on, and you leave that one on for 3 days. And essentially what it does is it accelerates the healing massively. So the healing process for a tattoo is you get it done, and then you have it wrapped in cling film or something similar. You take the cling film off. You have to wash away all the the plasma and the gunk and the blood and all that sort of stuff. Then when that's done, you kind of just leave it and wash it with antibac and whatever. So you'll see my knuckles. These are fresh. This was last week, last Thursday. So as you can see, you can actually see on the screen, like, this one here is all scabby and horrible. It's because these are healing naturally, right? Quote unquote naturally. So these will probably take about 3 weeks. And obviously with them being my hands, like I can't just jump back onto the mats like I would usually. With other tattoos, like I would just basically put 2 pairs of shorts on and just crack on. But with hand tattoos, I can't really do that. And I think because of how delicate hand tattoos are, it's probably not the best. Like for yourself, like as long as you keep it clean and you have some non-perfumed moisturizer, like a coconut oil or something like that, you'll be grand in a couple of weeks.
So like general maintenance and everything else, because again, like yours are quite grey, whereas your chest piece is very colourful. How do you maintain that? Is it the same kind of way? Because again, you don't want that sort of colour saturated. How do you maintain that? Is it the same kind of process?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is, I mean, general cleanliness, right? Like, that's obviously a huge one. The other one for color tattoos especially is if you go out in the sunlight, you need really, really high grade SPF sunscreen, right? It doesn't matter. Like, you go out and the sun will dilute the color. The sun will dilute the color of a black and gray tattoo as well. Like that, it absolutely will. And I have one here on my wrist, and you can see, like, look at the color difference. You see what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
and this hasn't been looked after really, but it's crazy, the color difference between my hand. Like, for the people that are just listening, my fresh tattoos are really black, like very, very black. But the one that I've had since I was 17 is pretty much gray at this point. Like, it's very faded out, and that's due to just not me taking care of it properly. So yeah, the general maintenance would be general cleanliness, look after yourself when you're in the sun, and if the skin feels dry, then just put a little bit of moisturizer on it, whether it's a coconut oil. I use something called, well, I don't have it in this room, but I use something called Hustle Butter. It was recommended to me by my first tattoo artist, and it's worked all right for me. It's just a very thick kind of moisturizing cream. You put a little tiny bit of film on, and it does the trick. Yeah.
Now, when you're in the sort of chair for quite long stints at a time, how do you like to spend that time anyway? Are you quite chatty when it happens, or is it sort of, okay, you try and switch off and relax? What's your usual kind of thing like that? Because today, I was just like, I tried to read for a bit, but then I'd get the odd sort of like really sort of sharp bit. Okay, I can't. Okay, it's okay. But every now and then I'm trying to concentrate. Like there's challenges, like you're getting shocked every now and then. It's like that kind of thing. Fucking hell, I can't get comfortable. Go on, what's yours?
So it's kind of a bit of both. Like, I think it's really important for you to build a relationship with your tattoo artist. One, because this piece is going to be on your skin for the rest of your life, but it's also, this is a reflection of their artistic process and their artistic ability, right? So I think to get them invested in your idea is really important, and one of the ways you do that is obviously before they start putting ink in your skin. But yeah, I mean, I kind of just try and read the room, and if the tattoo artist is open for conversation, I'll have conversation, because at the end of the day, these people are generally quite interesting people as well. There's a very specific person that decides to drill ink into somebody's skin, I think. So yeah, I think I prefer to be conversational, but you're never going to be conversational for 10 hours, 12 hours. And when I was in Russia getting my chest tattoo, I was absolutely silent. And I was silent because I was just focusing on, like, to give you an example of what the pain did. And this could just be my experience, but the pain was that bad that my toes started cramping, like my teeth were chattering. I kept, like, my chest was literally, caving away from the needle, but I wasn't doing it voluntarily. Like, this was happening. My body was just having a reaction to the pain, and it was like turning in on itself. And that was about 2 hours worth, right? So it was rough. It was very, very rough. That's the one and only time that I've asked and been offered for numbing cream. I think I had 2 lots of numbing cream to get the middle done. The rest of the chest was actually okay. Like, it was pretty fine. It felt just like a tattoo, but in the middle there was really, really bad. So I think it depends, but I would definitely lean towards liking to be conversational. I mean, did you use music? What did you do to get through it?
I mean, the nature of having a sort of calf piece is you're facing away. And if you're facing the same direction, tough. You can kind of, chat normally. But when you're facing, I was like, so got many more in today? Just a bit like, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just trying not to die a little bit. And I had Disney Plus on in the studio. So I had Toy Story 1, 2, and 3. I almost finished 3 before I left. I forgot how funny that show actually, those films actually were.
Mate,
you take it at that kind of layer, but then you don't appreciate the extra sort of adult jokes in there as the sort of you get older. It just gets better, really. Now,
how long were you in the chair for yours today?
For today, 4 hours. I've got another hour and a half next month just to finish off the shading. Sort of underestimate how long it'll take, but I'm kind of glad, because he was like, "Oh no, we've got to do it again." I think, you know what? I was pretty done. I was thinking, okay, that shading fucked me. I was thinking, nah, I'm not going to tap, but I'm just going to be like, okay, I'm okay.
So 2 points that you raised there are really interesting, right? The first one is that the reason why I do long sessions is not because I'm some fucking masochist. It's because I don't want to go through the recovery process twice. Like, the recovery process for me is way worse than the actual tattoo. And you'll get to this point. You'll get to the point in about a week when the tattoo's scabbed, it's going to start to itch, right? and it's not like a regular itch, because a regular itch you can scratch, but this you cannot scratch, right?
I'm getting issue thinking about it now.
Because what will happen is if you scratch the scabs, it will pull the ink out of the tattoo, right? And then you're just going to have to go back and get it done anyway, right? So I much prefer, like if an artist says to me, do you want to do one whole session or do you want to do two? Always, I will do one. I'll just do it, get it done with, and then I can do the recovery process once. And to your second point about line work versus shading. So actually my partner asked me, what does it feel like? What does a tattoo feel like? And I said, it's very difficult to explain what shading feels like. But line work to me, the best way I can describe it is if you were a rebel back in school and you got a paperclip and you turned the paperclip into a straight line and then you put it in a Bunsen burner. Imagine it like that, and then you drag it through your skin. Like that's what line work feels like to me. Line work to me is disgusting. Shade me all day if you want, all day. I ain't got a problem with it. But line work is awful, and I find it really interesting that the shading knocked you over the edge, right?
Well, this is where it got really funny. And again, to your point there about doing it separately, I mean, it was intentionally trying to do it in one sitting, but it was kind of an overshot on how long we thought it would be. And by that point, at 4 hours in, I was thinking, oh, this is, I've had a long morning. But,
mate, 4 hours for your first tattoo is heavy.
Is what it is. But again, it was a funny one. I don't know which bit actually was the worst bit, because when you're not facing the same direction, you're not sure which bit was the bad bit. And every little stint, I'd have like a bit of a walk around just because I'm sort of lying on my front. And I didn't even realize I had 4 different heads on the thing for different bits. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't know which bit was the bad bit. But every now and then, okay, it's either like a sort of, like the massage guns. It's like a bit of that initially, thinking, okay, that one's okay.
Yeah, sure.
But then you get like the sort of electric shock kind of thing, like, fuck. And I'm trying to like either raise my other leg up to try and take a bit of weight off for some reason. I don't know, some sort of reaction to try and take the strain off. Oh, it was an interesting one. I was thinking, I said to him as well, like, oh, if I'm brave, do I get a sticker? And he says, yeah, you get one for life. I'm thinking, no, he's got a point. I didn't get a lollipop though, so I'll need my money back, I think. But here we are.
Yeah, I'd fucking complain if you didn't get a lollipop, mate. That is absolutely atrocious behavior.
1 star on Facebook. Here we go.
Yeah, 1 star on Facebook, absolutely. And I think, the calf is a tender area, right? Because there's a lot of muscle there. There's a lot of nerves in your calf. So having, 4 hours or what was going to be 6.5 hours for your first ever tattoo. And obviously the piece that you've got there's lots of color in it. And color is obviously, it takes longer and there has to be more layers because, you have to make sure that the color's in rather than with black and gray. If it comes out, then it's kind of, you're not going to necessarily lose the same that you would with a color tattoo. But yeah, like I don't blame you. And it's so interesting, isn't it, to notice how your body reacts to pain, because you train, I train, we're kind of used to being in painful situations, but then it's a very specific type of pain getting tattooed, right?
This is so like, this is what really got me. I was thinking, how do fucking normies and casuals do this? How do these fucking people who can't be asked to go to the gym put themselves through this sort of pain? I'm thinking, how do people like this? Like, I get you want the tattoo, but fuck me, people who say, oh, I love the feeling, I think, why? It's horrible. I don't get it.
I'm kind of one of those people. I do. Let me try and explain it. Yeah, let me try and explain it. So there's a couple of things for me. I think that firstly, for me especially, and I think this probably may relate to you as well because of the piece that you actually have. You're getting that piece because it means something deeply to you, right? And I think that in order to get a tattoo, in order to encapsulate that meaning, you have to go through some form of struggle. Because if it didn't mean anything to you, then it wouldn't come easy, right? So the whole process of finding a tattoo and getting a tattoo should be arduous. You go and you look for the specific artist that you want. You find that person. If it's during lockdown or after lockdown, you're going to have to wait months for a date, right? For me specifically, some of the artists that I've had tattoos from have been abroad. So you then get visas, or you go and you book your flights, you book your Airbnbs and whatever, and you travel, right? But if they're in the UK, like I had for my knuckles, shout out Stay Good Tom on Instagram. Go and get stuff by him. He's at No Friends Tattoo in Brighton. For people that are getting something that means something extremely specific and extremely important to them, the tattoo should be a struggle. It should be something that takes a part of you, right? Because you're getting something. I think something that people don't necessarily think about when they're getting tattooed is that tattoo artist is putting a culmination of however many years they've been an artist into your tattoo, right? And they're doing it to give you the best product, and that best product is for you specifically. You've read a book and you've decided that the contents of this book mean so much to you that you want a constant reminder of the contents of that book on your skin. That's a massively powerful message, right? A massively powerful message that one man from Canada has decided to put some thoughts in a page, and it's resonated so deeply with you that you've decided to take it upon yourself to put yourself through even more struggle, however much struggle it is to get through that fucking book in the first place, right? Maps of Meaning is no fucking slim pickings. But you get through the book and you get to a level of understanding of that book that you want to carry that book with you forever. So, going through that pain, it's almost in some way sacrificial to the idea that you're getting. And I think that that's beautiful. So instead of, I'm not saying that I go there and you can tattoo whatever you want on me because I like the pain. Like, that's just bullshit. But I think that the pain is part of it, and I think that we should be accepting of that pain. So I don't go in there to be like, oh my God, it's gonna hurt. I'm going in to be like, it's just part of it. Like, it's just part of it. Don't get me wrong. I was told a lot about knuckle tattoos. I was told that they are atrociously painful. It's not that bad. But I went in there being like, I know this is going to be painful. It's okay. We'll just get through it anyway. And as I shouted out Tom before. Tom was a phenomenal artist. The whole process he made super seamless, and the way that he was extremely gentle with the way that he tattooed. Like, I don't know what your experience was. From what you said, it was pretty painful, so it may have been that your artist was rough. But you definitely get two different types of artists, right? You get the guys that just slam it in, right, and it's still going to look great, but they slam that ink in and they work quickly and they work roughly. And then there's artists that work a little bit slower, but they're much more delicate. But yeah, sorry, that's my rant about pain
Now,
and tattoos.
I love that so much. There is so much in that. I think it's really poignant. And again, it's sort of an icing on the cake that this should be the part that also follows suit of, you've gone through this arduous journey. This is the final arduous step, the final challenge of Hercules, whatever the thing's called. But again, that kind of idea. And with the tattoo as well, for everyone listening, so the piece I got done today was the Jordan Peterson's logo, the meaning of music was actually called. And the reason I got that done specifically is Jordan Peterson explains what his logo means. And it's so fucking confusing when he explains it. And the way I've managed to break this down is, he said it's a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional object of a fourth-dimensional concept. So what that means is, so yes, it already sounds confusing. And the idea of it is, it's why we like music. It's all these different layers of things coming out and concepts of, how flowers open up. It's that kind of extra layers coming out. And the reason I wanted to get this done is because, almost like Plato's theory of forms and these sort of concepts of, okay, you've got so many different ways of viewing the same things, and the way you can constantly review things and develop and always just, change your perspective. I like that as a whole. And one of the things in 12 Rules for Life I really appreciate, as well as Maps of Meaning, is one of the rules of being, do what's meaningful, not what's expedient. And exactly to your point there about, this isn't expedient, this isn't quick, this isn't painless, but it's meaningful. And again, regardless of that commitment I now have to Jordan Peterson as such, just more the concept of itself, that what is being said, what's represented there and then, is what's poignant to me. If Jordan says something I don't agree with, I'm not going to feel obligated to then, go and side with. This in itself is an instance of something I agree with, not a whole commitment and attachment. So with your tattoos you've got, what kind of so before I go on there, just a side note, the guy who did mine, take into caveat, I am a bit of a wuss when it comes to pain, so he might not have been rough. I'm just a bit of a, so shout out Joe Bennett anyway. But yeah, so regards to your tattoos, what's your philosophy of why you get yours and the sort of styles and designs you've got? Because again, you're quite a mix there. You've got obviously wording on your knuckles, you've got a very colourful piece in your chest, you've got black and white tattoos on your legs. What's your mantras, not mantras, but sort of mindset when you're getting your work done?
So There's a couple really, but there's one overarching theme, and the overarching theme is balance, right? And I know, and
Hey,
this
you should
isn't
get
a
a podcast
pun.
after that.
Yeah, this is actually way before the podcast, right? So the there's an interesting story behind the podcast actually,
Oh, here we
but
go.
yeah, like the tattoo idea is about balance. So one of Jordan Peterson's favorite philosophers, Carl Jung, he speaks a lot about the middle, the idea of the middle, and that's quite a Taoist point. You know, the idea of yin and yang, and the idea of the
Like
perfect
order and
line
chaos
in the
kind of
middle.
thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I have the words order and chaos on my knees. That's what I have, right? And I'll show you that after.
Oh,
But
well,
yeah,
over.
like yeah, easy.
It
Yeah,
goes.
like I think that for a lot of it, for a lot of things in life, people tend to lean towards the extremity of a point. Jordan Peterson himself leans to the extremity of some points, and the arguments that he's making against certain ideas are generally on the extremity of some other point. I prefer to try to lean in the middle, and leaning in the middle generally allows for a connection between both. So the idea being that your right side brain and your left side brain control the opposite side of your body, and they both control specific characteristics of yourself. The idea of my body is that my left side is my order side and my right side is my chaos side. So I will do so my right hand side being my chaos side, I've gone black and white because it's the opposite to chaos, in the same vein that my brain will do the opposite side. Left hand side at the moment doesn't have any, but it will be all color on the left hand side of my upper body because that's the opposite of order, right? And then my lower half of my body, order and chaos, is obviously the title of my theme. But the basically the bottom half of my legs are all memorial tattoos. So yeah, that's kind of how that is. Just, and the reason I got those is because I think that there's something quite beautiful about having memorial tattoos on your legs, because your legs are what you use to walk. So the idea that those memorial pieces are always walking with you. The middle of my chest is then the epicenter of the whole thing, right? So
The corpus callosum.
the actual yeah, nice. The actual piece itself is two planets exploding, and that comes from a saying, and that saying is, "I am the earth and you are my Thea." So Thea, Theia, is one, a Greek goddess, but it's also a theory of how the universe began, or how the world began, and it's that as the Big Bang happened, planets were moving around the solar system at an incredibly high rate, and this was kind of as gravity was growing and building and forming. So at the time there was no orbit patterns, there was no gravitational pull necessarily, and the idea is that what was to become of the Earth and what was to become the Moon crashed into each other, and when they split apart and gravity pulled them apart and put them on their own orbit cycles, part of the Moon lives in the Earth and part of the Earth lives in the Moon. And I think that if you anthropomorphize that, it's quite beautiful to think that, you know, everyone that you meet, whether it be your tattoo artist, whether it be me and you, like, this conversation will take a part of me and it will take a part of you, and as we go off again onto our own orbit cycles of life, you know, that conversation will live with that person. So it was initially a dedication to my grandmother, but it kind of extrapolates out to everything. So yeah, that's the meaning. Yeah.
I mean, there's so much in that. I find so, like, I don't know, quite insightful. Having that sort of chaos and order theme, I really like the sort of color transition. Again, the sort of meanings behind it. And something I've really started to appreciate is that transition between, I don't know, spirituality and like philosophy, and that kind of the balance between, you don't want to be one of sort of wishy-washy hippies, but you want to be a bit more mindful about the world around you and how you can think and perceive things. Because the last thing anyone wants to be is one of these
Yeah.
sort of, you know, just go back from Thailand, I got my fancy trousers and now I found myself. But you want to be a bit more, okay, I'm not, you know, self-unaware knobhead.
Sure.
I want to sort of, okay, I feel a bit weird. I feel
It's
weird.
balance, right? It's
That's
the
it.
middle.
Yeah, he knows. He brings it all back again. You know, consistency. Now, podcast. Talk to me about the podcast then. So you said there's an interesting story behind that,
Sure.
and again, the whole theme of balance in itself. Do you want to sort of elaborate on that a bit more?
I mean, I think so. Really, the name for the podcast came just from a conversation with one of my friends, and we wanted to put a podcast together. It was originally going to be two of us, but he's just way busier than I am, so wasn't able to commit to the whole thing. But we were just having a regular conversation that as we do, and I just said something like, "Yeah, but it's just all about balance," and he was like, "Yeah, that's it. Like that's the name." And I think that was kind of poignant and kind of nice in the way that it just happened organically and naturally. Like I was thinking for ages about. I mean, I probably wanted to do a podcast for about 5 years, right? Because the premise of the podcast, I should probably start there. The premise of the podcast is basically just long form conversation. It doesn't matter who it's with, what it's about, what it is. It's just long form conversation. And that's because, and I'd actually be interested to hear your thoughts about this, is I think that long form conversation is something that's an art to begin with. Like it's a skill, and it's something that's dying. And it's dying because I could send you, we've been speaking over Instagram. Like I could send you a meme, or I could send you an emoji or whatever, and it could replace an entire sentence. Well, if we extrapolate that out and say, if an emoji can replace one sentence, why can't 3 emojis replace 3 sentences? And then the more time and value that we put on emojis or memes, they will continue to replace longer form, longer, deeper discussions, deeper meanings. And this is actually something that Jordan talks about, is the evolution of language. And he talks about how, we're losing the meaning of what language is by changing the meaning of words and by not classifying and defining the meaning of words extremely universally. And whilst I think that that's going to be an extremely difficult task to universally, create maxims for the definitions of words, I think that doing our best to have open discussion about anything, really. I mean, it could be tattoos, it could be FIFA, it could be, you name it, it could be anything, essentially. But having long form discussion is something that I personally enjoy, and I think is lacking in a lot of humans. So the podcast is just that, really. Like if anyone has had a look at the All About Balance podcast, first of all, thank you very much. I'm really grateful for that. But secondly, there's not an episode that's under an hour, other than the third or fourth one, where I basically sat and talked a little bit about what I was thinking to do the podcast. But yeah, I mean, what do you think about conversation and those sorts of things?
And again, there's so much in that, like just trying to take all that in and really appreciate what you've said there. I think a huge thing, the way you describe that, in the over efficiency of language and communication, breaking things down into, I don't know, keep saying I get them mixed up. It's not initialisms, it's acronyms, a thing, LOL and things like that, sort of ways of breaking conversation down to shorter format. And again, you lose the opportunity to interpret, and you lose the level to try and break down what's being said and what's being meant by what's being said. And what I mean by that is general, like normal parlance, normal, like sort of small talk pleasantries. If you say, how are you? Your default answer can be good, how are you? No one means anything that's been said in that conversation. No, the person who asked didn't have any thought behind what was asked. The person answering didn't care what was being answered. And then you lose that kind of, I don't know, genuineness. I want to say genuinity, but it's not a word. Again, this kind of, I don't know, there's this whole thing of the frequency of what's being said loses the value of it. And I can't think who, was it probably some of the philosophers put me onto reading, I'm not sure. This concept of unknown waters. And that if I ask you how you are today, you know how you are today. You're going to answer me a sort of mentally led answer of, okay, yes, I'm fine. Where it could be, I am fine, but this happened. Whereas if I ask you something completely off the cuff, something you weren't prepared for, your then reaction will be a lot more organic, a lot more pure of, okay, I don't know, how do I feel about it? And you've got to really think and really get a raw answer to these things. And I feel that's kind of lost as well with that fear of being vulnerable. And on top of that, in general, this is why long form conversation is a really interesting one. Because when you have an interview versus a podcast, and I would like to make a clear distinction between that. Now, if you have an interview, it's very poignant that, okay, we've got a very fixed cause in mind. You've got an upcoming event which are going to try and highlight certain factors that people want to know about this. How are you feeling? Always going to be great. Always going to be the best I've ever felt. What's the point in fucking asking? How's your weight?
Best camp of my life, even though I've got 2 broken feet.
Yep. How's your weight? Oh yeah, trim, lean, nutritionist is on point. Yep. How are you going to win your fight? Don't know, but I'm good, working hard. It's going to get the result however I get it. And, thank you, good luck, see you later. And that has zero emotional investment and zero interest in it. It's just forced. It's there to get clickbait. It's there just to, get a view. And as much as I don't like it, I see why people do it. I get it. But regards to a podcast and a conversation, you get an idea of how people think. This is a huge theme behind most of my conversations, is the way people think. When I ask my questions, it's not, I don't really care that much about the answer. It's more the way it's been answered. It's the factors involved in answering the question that, okay, I'm overcoming certain things. Okay, if I ask someone preparation for a fight, it's interesting the way people answer things and the language they use. A lot of it comes down to external factors. A lot of it comes down to letting people down, doing things to improve and impress other people, beating yourself up too much. Always very I don't know, a lot of it of value systems. And this is why long-term conversation I find really beneficial. And I feel a huge reason why it's not as appreciated as it should be is just purely on marketability and people with a concept of not having time to do it. And the amount of people, including myself, who haven't got time to watch a 1 hour podcast but can watch 6-10 minute videos no problem. Don't get me started. I'm the biggest hypocrite and I'm not going to pretend I'm not. But I get it. I'm not going to pretend I don't get it. But when you're doing it, you can really appreciate it because you've been in that experience. Like this conversation now, I've not checked the time once. I don't care about any of that kind of stuff. I'm just enjoying this. It's got a natural flow to it. And for someone who sees this afterwards, seeing it be an hour, hour and a half, however long it's being, they'll say, okay, that's going to take this time. They don't appreciate what's gone on and this whole depth of it. And you have to get it. And again, it's just also being aware of not everyone has the same thought process and the same kind of mindset. And that's something I really struggled with for a while, is trying to accept that not everyone gets it, not everyone works the same way. And it's a bit pill to swallow sometimes that not everyone wants to, get up at 5 a.m., take a picture of their watch like Jocko Willink or 4 a.m., whatever it is, and, go for a run and then do jiu-jitsu and then go to work. No, people want to have a lie-in and have a fry and then go to work and then, go to the pub. Certain things don't gel, but you got to sort of accept it. I don't really know if I answered your question, but yeah, I kind of went on different tangents.
I think so. I mean, I think there's a couple of things that you pointed out that we should expand on. The first one is the idea of effort. So, and I think this is really prevalent now. And you touched on marketing, and obviously, if anyone knows Jordan Peterson, you're likely to know Dr. Gard Saad, and he is, I guess he's a biologist, but his work, a lot of work is in marketing, like biological marketing and how marketing affects humans. And his argument is that marketing affects everything, and marketing dictates the way that we do everything. And if you think about the idea of marketing, and the idea of marketing essentially is getting you to engage or purchase or, determine yourself to be aligned with something, whether it be a football team, whether it be a game, whether it be a game's console, whether it be a female or a male or a celebrity or whatever it is, right? Marketing will determine a lot of your thought processes. And marketing determines, as you've just said, whether somebody will actually engage with this podcast. So I've just checked the timer. We're running at 40 minutes ish, just under 40 minutes. And we're probably going to go another 40 minutes, right? But when somebody sees this and they have a look on YouTube or they have a look on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, and they see an hour and a half, they'll be like, fuck me, like that's a lot. And all they have to do is listen, right? They don't even have to engage other than that, right? All they have to do is listen. But the idea of taking an hour and a half of time, bearing in mind time has its own value, that's a relative variable, right? People will deter from taking an action based on what they perceive to be the effort to be. For instance, if I said to you, what takes more effort, playing a game of FIFA or going and taking the bins out? The answer is probably going to be the bins takes more effort than playing FIFA. But actually,
you haven't seen the emotional investment though. You haven't seen that calorie wise, everything that's heart rate,
mate, I used to play Call of Duty semi-professionally. I am well aware of the emotional investment that goes into games. Like,
why is this not the prime point of conversation? Like MLG or something, game battles. What? Talk to me. We'll take a bit
game battles.
Okay, cool. We'll get back to put a pin in that. Back to
all right. Yeah, we'll put a pin in that. Yeah, we'll put a pin in that. So yeah, like I think the point of effort is really, really important. And if you look at things like Instagram or Twitter or, even news outlets now, a lot of the way that people have to promote longer form podcasts is by getting a Canva fucking little clip up where there's a slight video segment, or there's an audiogram with like 15 seconds, and you then get a link to it, and it's like, we'll draw people in that way. And then actually what happens is that clip is like halfway through, and it's a little bit clickbaity, it's a little bit sexy, but they'll that's in the middle of the podcast, and you have to wait the middle of the podcast, and by that point people are like, fuck it, I'm already halfway in, I'll just crack on with the whole thing. I kind of don't like that, which is why I don't do it. Like, I feel like, and I know that this is probably detrimental to my audience, right? Like, maybe offline we can talk about numbers. I'd be happy to talk about numbers publicly, but the listens for the podcast are not what I would like them to be. But I understand why they're not like that. And they're not like that because I try to build the audience as organically as possible. I'll put conversations out, and the one that I just recorded on Monday was 3 hours, 10 minutes, right? Like, that's a long podcast, right? That's a long podcast, but it was fucking phenomenal. The guest I had on spoke about a lot of shit, and they spoke openly and they spoke candidly, and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful conversation. And how many people will listen to that? Maybe less than 50, right? Maybe less than 50. But to me, what's important is the 50 people that did get that podcast and they did listen to that podcast, even if they didn't listen to all of it. Maybe 10% of that 50 only listened to the full 3 hours. Fine. If those 5 people enjoyed it and took something away from it, that's cool. That's cool to me. Because eventually, maybe I'll have that guy on again. And his name's Tom Walker. Just shout out to Tom Walker. I don't know when this will come out.
The singer?
Shout out to Tom Walker. No. He's a physio.
Just drop that in there.
No, he's an ex Great Britain skeleton bobsleigh, now turned physiotherapist, also a jiu-jitsu guy. Like, yeah, you should have him on.
So you say you didn't want sexy, like, clickbait titles, and there we go there. That's a little sexy clickbait little drop in there. Now, this brings up a really, really interesting sort of moral dilemma I've had myself many times when it comes to the podcast and the way you promote things, is clickbait and trying to get the audience you feel your podcast deserves versus keeping the integrity of what model you want to present. So prime example, I've had on people who have been very open about their mental health and certain struggles they've had overcoming addiction, this, that, and the other. Now, if I then try and make that share these clips, this, that, and the other, well, despite it already being public, I feel that by presenting it in like, oh, check out this, they're talking about this, I feel it gives it a bit of a sour note, despite the fact it's already public. Like, what's your views on that? Because again, you're saying how you don't do that in your own sort of podcast, but what is your moral compass from an outside perspective on that kind of situation?
Well, look, I'd be a hypocrite too, because while I hate that shit, I think, look, if somebody is going to, I mean, there's a couple of points, right? Let me argue for both sides. The first side is that it is public, right? It is public in that person has got to a level of their own mental stability to be able to talk about it publicly on a public forum, and they are happy for it to be publicized to thousands of people, tens of thousands of people potentially. Fine. Then by that, you can then go and promote that how you will. To me, though, somebody has entrusted to you that information, and it's now up to you to, what's the word I'm looking for? To honor that trust, right? And to me, the way that should be presented is with the same level of integrity that you would expect if you opened up like that to somebody on a podcast. Now, to me, mental health isn't sexy, really. Addiction isn't sexy necessarily. These are really hard topics that I think are really important to talk about, but they don't need to be effervescently marketed. Now, in the same vein, if you want to market it in a very ethical way and just say that, in this episode touches on mental health, and I'm really grateful for X guest for coming on and discussing it, I think that's fine. I don't think there's any problem with that whatsoever. But as you rightly say, there have been podcasts, and I have seen podcasts that are like, oh, this person talks about beating this addiction and that addiction and what it's like to snort 17 lines of coke off some woman's ass. Like, yeah, like we've all seen that, right?
There's 17 lines, or there's quite a few.
Mate, people have big bums. What are you gonna do? Like, you know,
Width.
there's the only, or maybe it's more than one. Who knows? The thing that I struggle with is that when you see that headline, you are naturally inclined to click it, right? You are naturally inclined to watch that clip. You are naturally inclined to be like, "Ooh, that's interesting," because it's loud. It's loud in its content. It's loud in the idea that, you know, it's drama, right? And humans are drawn to drama. And I think this is probably something that becomes very prevalent in your conversation with athletes. Ooh, actually, let me segue slightly. I want to ask you this. What do you determine the people that you interview to be, or have a podcast to be? Are they athletes? Are they fighters? Are they competitors? Are they martial artists? What are they?
So I've managed to not rabbit hole myself quite nicely with this. It's also in my trailer. I speak to fighters from all walks of life, whether they do their fighting in the cage, in the ring, on the battlefield, or wherever they do it in their lives respectively. So I call it fighters in general. Now, what that means could be in the, I don't know, MMA, jiu-jitsu, could be people who are self-employed, starting their own businesses, could be, prime example, Andrew Henderson, who came on, he was a freestyle footballing world champion or something, then he did a Fame MMA fight, and now he's still trained, but also this whole paradigm between having a following based off of a completely different career to what he wants to do, and this, that, and the other, and this whole, I don't know, like not the sort of cliche, yes, I've had on UFC guys, Bellator guys, this, that, and the other, but there's more to the world than, you know, the sort of same people you see all the time on. And again, interesting people, because a huge part of the people who I get on is people I find interesting. Like,
mate, that's it. Done. Finished. Done. That's it.
This podcast, I make this very clear every time anyone asks me this. This podcast is for me to speak to people I want to speak to about. And if anyone else listens to it, happy days. Like, I make this podcast very selfishly in the format I like. Yep. I take things out of podcasts I don't like and make things, you know, my little, what's the word? Not the Bruce Lee kind of thing, you know, take what's good, leave what's not, this kind of thing.
Yeah. To an extent. Discard what is useless and keep what is useful.
Something like that.
And it was Bruce Lee. But like the only thing that I would disagree with you there is I do my best not to edit anything out. The way that I will do it is before the podcast, I will offer the guest, like, is there anything you want to speak about? Is there anything you don't want to speak about? And then they'll either say yes or no. And if they say no, like this I definitely don't want to talk about, then obviously like you respect that and you veer away from that. At the end of the podcast, I will say to them, like, I can offer you an opportunity to listen to the podcast once I've done my first edit. If you want to listen to it, then you can do your best. You can crack on. Only a couple of people have really taken me up on that. And then they've actually come back and said, please, can you edit this out? Please, can you edit that out? And I have absolutely no problem with doing that. If the guest wants something edited out, I'm fine with that. I will never edit anything out that I have said. Because look, if I said it, I fucking said it. And that's it. And the only thing I'll edit out is like if you have a network drop or something, you know, some fucking builder turns a drill on or something, like, yeah, fine. I'll
bits and bobs, yeah. Tidying up.
Yeah, that's fine. But other than that, everything stays in.
Yeah, mine's the same. I just trim the ends. And again, like we did before, it's just sort of, you know, the sort of brief kind of, okay, anything you want me to highlight, leave out. And then afterwards, how was that? Take anything out, keep it in. Like, no, cool. So, and most of the time, because of the nature of the conversation, if you're not trying to lead it into a way that you know they'll be uncomfortable, then not necessarily you'll find anything, you know, not worth, it needs taking out as such. And with regard to your sort of style, then, who do you like to speak to? Because again, you said people you want to speak to about different concepts, just in long form conversation, not in the same sort of, I don't know, the rabbit hole of jiu-jitsu specifically. What is your criteria for a guest you'd have on?
I don't really have one. Like, you know, this how it started is in the first sort of 4 or 5 episodes, I basically just interviewed my friends. Like, I chatted with my friends. I'm very, very conscious because you said you made the delineation between interviewer and podcast, and now I've got the word interview in my head, so I keep saying it, but I don't fucking mean that.
I know you mean
conversation. Like, by starting, I just had my friends, and it just so happens that some of my friends have really good followings and people, you know, got them out there and whatever. But it also just so happens that a lot of my friends are jiu-jitsu people. And whilst if somebody watches or looks at you know, the discography of my episodes, you may think it's just a jiu-jitsu podcast. It's anything but a jiu-jitsu podcast. Anything but a jiu-jitsu podcast. The only thing that I do that's actually pertains to fighting is myself, a guy called Sean McGuinness, and a guy called Jack Sear. We go and we'll do an MMA breakdown for some of the cards, because Sean and Jack are absolutely phenomenal at breaking down fights. Jack's got one of the best historical minds for MMA that I've ever known of anyone. He can tell you what happened at UFC 53 like it was yesterday, and I just don't understand. And Sean is an MMA coach at Scramble Academy Leeds, and his knowledge of MMA and especially cage wrestling. And one of his favorite things is the head and arm takedown that you see Michelle Waterson hit. That's one of his favorite things. So yeah, like his knowledge on those sorts of things are beautiful. So I do that. That's with the MMA guys. But for booking a guest for All About Balance, like specifically, like, if they're up for a long form conversation, I'll book them. It's fine. I don't really mind where you're from or what you're about. I really don't mind. Like, you know, I've had obviously some relatively big names in jiu-jitsu. I've had Robert Drysdale, ADCC champion. I've had Ross Nichols, obviously arguably the best UK standout we've had. He's been to ADCC. I've had Ash Williams. I've had these kinds of people, right? Like big names in the jiu-jitsu scene. But then I've also got, you know, the next couple of weeks, I've got one of my old mates from work. I've got a doctor coming on to chat about shit. You know, I've got people from all kinds of walks of life. So I try not to, as you say, and although predominantly you've got MMA fighters and these kind of people, like if you scroll through, a lot of them are MMA fighters, they're combat athletes. You've had me on, like, Jesus, like I'm no MMA fighter. I've had a couple of kickboxing bouts and I've done some jiu-jitsu competitions, but I'm fucking definitely not an athlete, right? So yeah, that's kind of it.
I'll tell you one thing I do struggle with is booking people who aren't necessarily in the same limelight, because they seem to feel they're not up to standard almost. And it hurts me a little bit here and there. I feel a bit quite, I'll take back thinking I'm not a big name. Thinking, well, what do you mean? Like, this is a very, very clear distinction I'd like to make with this, is that there's no such thing as better guests. It's higher profile, but not better people. And just because someone has a bigger following, it is very tempting to use a certain wording, but you have to be very careful. Like, say if I was given, say the slot we had was between you and Conor McGregor. Now, the higher profile...
Conor McGregor, what a fucking conversation that would be. What a conversation
this is what I mean, for example. So, okay, you've got two people who you want to have a conversation with, and then you've got one person who's got a colossal following, and you've got someone who hasn't got the same sort of size following. Now, the way you'd handle that, you wouldn't say, I've got someone better, fuck off. You'd say, I've had a very rare opportunity with someone not very attainable. Are you okay to reschedule? And the way it's very careful. So not someone better, not someone more important, but the attainability doesn't equate to value as such. You're a valuable person. This conversation is valuable in its own right. And then
I agree.
Again, it's very tricky to try and get people, like guys from my gym and stuff. Since I had like guys on like Brad Pickett, this, that, and the other, they think, oh, you've had big names on. Like, why would you want me? You're thinking, I want you on anyway, regardless of who I've had on beforehand and afterwards. This conversation has as much value as these ones do.
Yeah, like one of my close friends, I really want to get him on, and he's exactly that. Even though he's got a master's degree, he's got like 2 bachelors, he's got this, that, and the other. He's one of the best minds that I know. I'm like, come on and chat. And he's like, oh, I'm not sure I've got anything to say. And I'm like, that's absolute horseshit. Like, you've got loads to say. And yeah, I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right. The way that you just detail how you handle it is phenomenal, right? It's absolutely phenomenal. Because look, at the end of the day, Conor is, I mean, maybe we'll get into what our opinions of Conor are, but like Conor is obviously a mega star, the biggest star that MMA has ever seen ever, and will likely see in a long, long time. You know, I think the closest person at the moment we have to being Conor McGregor level is Israel Adesanya, and I think he's not going to reach anywhere near the level of stardom that Conor has. And that's nothing against Israel Adesanya. I just think that the story of Conor and the way that Conor is and the way that Conor was during that rise, that 145 rise, is just something unprecedented. It happened at the perfect time in the sport. It happened at the perfect time for Conor. And look, now we've got, he's going to fucking fight Manny Pacquiao at 170. Like, whatever. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you came to me and was like, look, Conor McGregor's asked to be on the podcast, I'd be like, fuck me. like you're going to be inundated with guests for a year. Like, I'll chat to you next year. It's cool. Don't worry about it. But your use of language, I think, is really, really important. And the use of language globally is really important. One of the tattoos I have, this one on my wrist that's all faded, it says time, words, and effort, right? And the reason why I have that is because I think that those are the three pillars of what a man should try to master. If you can master what it is to understand like time as an entity and how you use time, how you spend time, how you give time, how you take time. If you can understand or try to master words, how you use words and how they relate to the time that you spend and take, and the effort that you put into both of the previous pillars, you're probably on the route to being a relatively decent person, a relatively decent man. So, you know, like you say, words are super important, super important. How you portray yourself, how you portray your brand. Because at the end of the day, like Fisticuffs has got what, like 1,300 followers, something like that?
Well, on Instagram, about just under 2,000 now.
Yeah, right, cool. Like that's a large following for a podcast, right? And me, like I use the same page as my personal page, and you know I debate relatively often whether I should start an Instagram for just a podcast, but I mean fuck it at this point, like it is what it is. But you know, I've got just over 350 followers, and you know the same, you know, what you're saying is so important, is that, you know, okay, you've got 2,000 followers, let's just say, and I've got 350 followers. Yeah, round it up, fine. We got 2,000 followers and 350 followers, but that does not depict the value of a person at all, right? And I think that this is something that is really, really, really overshadowed a lot now in the social media age, right? You've got people that define their character by likes, define their character by story views, define their character by how many watches they had on YouTube, how many listens they had on Buzzsprout. Like, do you look at the stats for the podcast at all? Do you look at them?
Sorry, you've hit a nerve with that, and I love that so much. I check the overall number, and I get a brief sort of view. Okay, this is how many I've got per episode. Which ones are doing well, which ones aren't doing as great, which ones need more promo, that kind of thing. But I don't take it personally. I get a rough idea what it should do, and steady trajectory is what it is. The likes are something I used to get really hung up about on my personal page and things like that. And again, there's something so significant in this anyway. This is something I think a lot of people need to listen to this very carefully. Numbers are arbitrary. And I'll say it again, numbers are arbitrary. And what that means is how many likes would be sufficient for you to be content with a post? And then you say, okay, 100 for a round number. So what if you got 95? And you say, well, I guess that's pretty much the same. So there's 5. Then what if it was 90? Well, not really, no, we're on 100. Well, you want a 95 minute, if that 5 didn't make a difference, another 5, what does that mean? And then you keep going these little increments, saying, what does the number actually mean? And at what point would you actually be content with what the thing is? And it's so easy to get in the hole of, okay, you get these sort of dopamine spikes of, okay, people like it, people resonate with my personal thing. It's a very honest and very personal thing. A podcast is your expression. This is a very long form, even more honest than a standard post anyway. This is something you've invested a lot into. So the way people resonate that is very much like, okay, this is how I'm being valued in this sort of moment. And then as long as it's keeping going upwards, you're always feeling, okay, I feel fulfilled. And then it's where you get that kind of fulfillment from. And the same thing with how many followers would you like your podcast to get? Like, what does that mean? Like, my numbers are very arbitrary in themselves. Like they go up, go down. I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, as long as people on the feed are people I care about, people I want to hear from. If not, I'd sack them off. And that's it. If it grows, you know, happy days. But my model of building it is very much, it's a bit, not narcissistic. What is it? It's very much like, it's a very vanity-driven thing. I get people on, they like talking about themselves. They share people who they like and who like them, and they promote themselves. Very self-sufficient, very self-building thing. I don't really need to do that much with it. But
so I completely agree, right? And I think the point that you did touch on, but I just want to go into a little bit further, is look, the same vein, if you say to somebody,
sorry, just turn my light on real quick so I can see me properly.
Yeah, no problems. If you say to somebody, how many likes would it take for you to feel positive about this post? They say 100, right? That 100 likes only lasts for a couple of posts, right? And then it becomes 150. It becomes 110. It becomes 120. Forever, that will incrementally rise and exponentially rise until you're getting infinite amount of likes, right? Until you reach, I think it's probably something similar to the figure of salary, right? Like there was a study done ages ago about if you earn more than £70,000, basically whatever you're adding on until you reach like millions doesn't mean anything. You don't see a change. You don't notice a change in your mental well-being, your happiness, whatever. And the idea behind that is if you can pay your mortgage, if you can pay your bills, if you can go into a shop for your groceries and you don't have to look at the bill, you just pay it. If you go out and you take your daughter or your friend or your partner or your, whatever for a meal and you pay the bill, you don't have to look at it. You can just pay it, right? You haven't got to worry about whether the money's in your bank account. It then kind of doesn't matter the increment at which your salary rises because it's just more money, right? It's just more shit. It's just more digits in the bank account. And it's the same on Instagram. Like, do you think Conor McGregor looks at his post and be like, that one's only got 113 million likes and that one's got 112 million likes. Like, I need to get my abs out again. No. Does he fuck? Like, he doesn't give one iota of care towards it. And I think there becomes an exponential rise. There becomes a cutoff point, right? Same with Kim Kardashian. Like, do you reckon Kim Kardashian checks when she's getting paid 350 grand per Instagram post how many likes she gets? No, of course she fucking doesn't. But it's the people that are lower down in this supposed social dominant hierarchy that are trying to wage their way to another ground, another level of, hierarchical prowess, shall we say. And I absolutely agree with the way that you talk about your feed and talk about your following is that, look, at the end of the day, you're going to have people on. People are going to promote it, hopefully. And if they don't, that's fine. Like I always ask my guys, make an actual Instagram post about it because you get far more interaction than if you make a story about it. If you'd like to do both, that's amazing. That's all I can ask for. If you just want to make a story, that's fine. Some people use their posts, their feed as like an artistic expression. And that's cool. If you don't want to muddy it up with some fucking poster that I put together in Photoshop, then that's absolutely fine. I got no problem with that. You do what you feel is best. But that will then grow organically. And it's like, I don't want to turn this into a jiu-jitsu podcast and I won't, but like, how long have you been training?
6 years now, I think.
Right. And what, you're a purple belt, brown belt?
Blue belt. MMA mainly.
Okay,
mainly Nogi. I started when the Ice Bucket Challenge was a thing, but no, carry on. Yeah, shout out to my coaches who have purple belts soon come. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, promote this motherfucker. It's 6 years. Come on. Like, I think the point here is that you just keep turning up. You keep turning up regardless of the reward, regardless of whatever. You just keep turning up. And the podcast is the same. You just keep turning up. And right, like at the end of the day, you may never grow. I may never grow. Our podcasts may stay exactly the same level as they are. That's fine because I'm getting a level of fulfillment. You're getting a level of fulfillment. Would I get more fulfillment knowing that 100,000 people are watching my podcast? Maybe. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter.
Now, I'm going to counter this point with something Ash Williams said on my podcast with him, which I also shamelessly plugged as well, was showing up is the minimum. So showing up is the minimum. Like, you don't get an A in school from just showing up. You have to put the work in as well. And again, this is
that depends. That depends.
Go on. What does it depend?
So, well, it depends because if you've got a super fucking genius, because the point here, right? The point here is that you need to put the work in, but putting the work in is a variable, right? Putting the work in is not just 100% something, because it's impossible for you okay, let me ask you this question. If you go to the gym for 6 years and you've been training for 6 years, have you put the same amount of effort in every single session for 6 years?
No, it varies.
Then what does putting the work in mean?
Okay, that's what this is now a different conversation itself. This is more being very specific.
Sorry, go on. Sorry, I've derailed it.
Now, this turns into being very specific in what you're doing. And this is the next point Ash made as well, which I thought was even more point.
Okay, yeah, go.
So attendance is the minimum. If you want to get your grades, you want to do anything, you have to show up as the base of, okay, this is how you get there. And then what you do from there onwards and the efficiency of what you're doing. So take training for another prime example. And what he said on this, which I've started doing a lot more with, is not just going for the social. Again, this is for people who want to progress. If you want to have fun and just do it how you want to do it, to crack on. But this is more if you want to progress. It's more a case of, okay, go in, think about what you're doing, think about what you did, and try and build in these sort of things. Be more cognitive, be more aware, not hanging around, not being like, doing things that's superfluous, doing things that's just a bit of like, hanging about. It doesn't mean you can't take rest rounds, doesn't mean you can't, chat for a bit, but, not hanging around longer than you need to, not fucking around, being aware of what you're doing, being a bit more be more present. And it's the same kind of concept even with this. And again, I'm not sure what the original point was, but a lot more a case of, okay, whatever you're doing is showing up and being on autopilot is one thing, but don't expect results for the work you're not putting in. And again, it's so much. And the initial point again about these sort of belts, grading and status and all this kind of stuff, it's very, you can only give value. We only have value from things you've given value. Like, I can't think who said it. Was it Nietzsche or someone? Again, this concept of, we give value to things, they don't give value to us. This kind of thing of how you can, these titles, this, that, and the other. And again, it's that's why numbers and stuff it's a very toxic thing, especially in this sort of day and age of social media. And that, I don't know.
Well, I mean, again, I think there's 2 points, right? The first point is you're absolutely right. And what I've done is I've rather just stampeded over your point. I completely agree with Ash that at the end of the day, turning up is just a bare minimum. It is. Because there's guys at our gym that turn up just because their mates are there. And look, there's absolutely no problem with that. If anything, those are the people that keep the gym alive, right? Because the guys that are competing, the guys that are going out and doing this full time, a lot of the time they're training at either, cut prices or they're training for free, right? Because they give the gym something back in terms of brand. So, your 9 to 5 workers, like myself essentially, but I do want to progress. Like those guys that go and they're on the mats and they're there because their boys are there and their female friends are there and they're just rolling and having fun. That's cool. It's great to see. It builds a great community. There's a lovely feeling when that happens. But there are also the guys that want to compete. And I think what I've done is rather than basically I go with that mentality, but because I go with that mentality, I've just decided that everyone else does, right? But obviously that's not the case. So I completely agree with Ash on that point. I think obviously you turn up. Obviously you if you're wanting to progress, you take notes in your head or physically. You go over what you've done. You think about what you've done on the journey home and all that sort of stuff. That's super important. And the same with the podcast, right? Like with the podcast, I try to make it as quality as possible, obviously. But I make it quality as possible because I want a quality product. Which goes back to your kind of point of doing it essentially selfishly, because you want a quality product. You want a good conversation. Do you listen back to your own episodes?
I did. Then I started doing too many. I couldn't keep up with myself, which in itself kind of says everything.
I hear that. But like, if I have one of my favorite episodes, I've listened to about 5 times now. It's just because I really enjoyed the conversation. It was a good conversation. I'll go back and listen to it. And I feel like if I have something that I want to go back and listen to, then I will do, right? I'll throw one of Ash's other quotes to you and see what you think about it. So this is
should we get Ash back on?
Yeah, fuck it. Let's drag him in. Bring him up now. Fuck it. Bring him in. Like his question, his thought was about there's a popular opinion or a popular comparison that jiu-jitsu is like chess, right? Has he told you this one?
It's something about school, but anyway, go on.
Okay, cool. So the chess thing, what he's saying is, people say that jiu-jitsu is like chess. He's like, I hate that. Because when I do jiu-jitsu, chess, I take a turn, you take a turn, I take a turn, you take a turn. He said in jiu-jitsu, when I roll, it's always my turn.
I like that a lot. I like that a lot. Yeah. Those kind of things I really like. And this is a huge part of, I think this is why philosophy really resonates with me and a lot of people I feel in like, I don't know, this sort of training world. And like my background's been like MMA and like jiu-jitsu as well and and this, that, and the other. And again, you get a lot of the same sort of mantras, the classic Nietzsche's of, what doesn't kill makes you stronger, these kind of things as well. And I think because of the nature of what, the classic kind of, okay, this is a very open sport. It's very open, non-defined ways. Okay, there's a better way to do things than others for very specific people. Nothing's like set in stone. And the nature of philosophy in itself is trying to perceive things, it's trying to understand things, it's trying to get a way of, I don't know, making it work for you, making you understand things. So I feel this is why they go hand in hand, especially like stoicism, without, blowing your own trumpet too much, because I get a bit sick of that. It's a bit like, oh, look at me, I'll think of myself. And I'm just... Anyway, that's a conversation. That's Nietzsche's sort of influence. Beyond Good and Evil has really fucked with my head. Because the thing is, I read, was it Daily Stoic, then Beyond Good and Evil. So I thought, okay, I initially listened to it, I think, okay, Stoics are a bit knobby, a bit like, oh yeah, self-righteous. And then Nietzsche's like, yeah, they're very fucking self-righteous. Obviously, need those words, but it's not far off. Thinking, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, that's not the point. The task at hand was, okay, this is a very open sport. No direct guidelines of, okay, this is how you should do things. This is the only way to do things. And then trying to make things work for you. I think this is why they seem to translate so well. Hence why you get all the analogies. You get all the sort of, the ground emotion, and I'm a shark, and this, that, and the other. Cringy one, do you want? Like, go on, Nick. What's your cringiest jiu-jitsu metaphor? Go on, make me cringe.
I don't even know, to be honest. Like, I do my best to stay away from all that stuff. I think probably the worst is, like, the mat is my ocean and I am a shark. I'm like, oh my God. Like, that is an awful one. I think probably the one that makes me cringe the most is when people say that strength means nothing in jiu-jitsu. Like that, yeah. And I just like, I'm like, okay, because like I'm massively overweight right now for what I should be. Like when I really walk around, I'm like 10 kilos overweight, right? But if me at even at my weight now, like I'm like 75 kilos now, right? It should be about 65. But like if I walk into the gym and a day one white belt turns up, that's 120 kilos of lean muscle mass.
Fucking hell.
Strength,
white belt?
Strength matters, okay? Like maybe I'll outlast him because he may gas quicker than I will, and maybe I'll get the tap. But it is not the same thing as rolling with another 65 kg human. It's just not the same thing. And I think, I know that what you wanted was a funny, cringy thing, but I do my best to stay away from them. And that one is like, when people are like, yeah, I do jiu-jitsu because strength doesn't matter. And I'm like, no, sir. No.
Again, it's just so much in it as well. And like with that, I think is it Henna Gracie, the most most American man in the world in the jiu-jitsu world, is like, okay, I think every belt's like 10 kilos or something like that, he says, or 10 pounds, whatever he calls it. It kind of makes sense. Yeah. So like, yeah, like a 10-pound heavier white belt and a sort of same pound, like, I don't know, blue belt, it's jiu-jitsu math. Again, I think it gets too convoluted to try and get definitive, like, okay, this is the exact sort of, comparison. But yeah, you just get that. And I get the gist. I get the principle they kind of go off of. Okay, technique's a priority, but like,
just say that.
It's going to make a bit of a difference if the fucking unit. It's going to the judo grip. You say, okay, strength doesn't matter. All right, show me a grip break. Show me your angles. I get Alivanka, leverage, all this kind of stuff. But, have a day off.
Yeah, I agree. I really like okay, like people are saying that Mikey Musumeci match at the Europeans, right? Where he held on and managed to get the sweep. Like, yeah, cool. Congratulations, bro. But man, strength matters. Like the difference there was a massive disparity in skill. Like Mikey's skill was just unbelievably different. But, I think...
And also the Gio Martinez and the quintet against who's a massive friend, 110 kilos of the front headlock you got on with.
Yeah, that Donnie that had a fucking Kimura grip and looked like he was going to rip Gio apart. But, we say about size, like I've heard from a lot of people that have rolled with Gio that he is freakishly strong for his weight. Freakishly strong.
Freakishly strong.
But that makes sense, right? All the b-boy stuff and the dancing and putting, having strength in strange positions. Like, no doubt he's super strong, right? I don't doubt he is super strong at all. A question I have for you, just slightly changing the topic, is you said obviously your background's MMA and those sorts of things. Like, why predominantly jiu-jitsu now?
I'm still actively training MMA as well, and we'll compete again soon. The last fight was in March. But I don't know, a lot of it was this concept of identity. So when it comes to doing martial arts, especially like, MMA, the more garish, more brutal ones from an outside perspective anyway, you get this title of being an MMA fighter, being a cage fighter for the sort of casuals and the normies. They think, okay, fucking hell, he's hard as nails. It must be, Conor McGregor. So thinking, okay, sick. Well, you haven't seen me going on the scales at 66 at 6'2", but here we are. And
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it was
featherweight at 6'2".
Yep, here we are. It's long old. Anyway, so you get this whole concept of, okay, this is what you want. You want to be this kind of, I don't know, you fight, you have a camp, you have a fight, then you rinse and repeat. This is who you are, this is how you're known as. And then you get in this bubble. And where I live and where I train and where I work, it's a nice little triangle. And this became my world. This whole massive planet we live on, this 30-mile triangle is my world. And when lockdowns happened as well, I had my fight, got my win, and I was like, okay, now what? Like, I was over it. So my hand went up, I won. It went down, I was over it. I was training the next day. I was over. I didn't give a shit. I was a bit, just discontent. I was thinking, okay, now what? So then having that time off, I got to I started my podcast. I started loads of stuff. I just enjoyed being Dan again. Like, I wasn't Dan who's the MMA fighter. I was Dan who also likes MMA. And these sort of distinctions. And jiu-jitsu is just something you can play with and have fun with. And like, I was watching instructionals, I'm trying new stuff. And I'm still dabbling in MMA, but I'm trying to make it more about it being fun. If I want to do it, I'll do it. If I feel like sparring, if I don't feel like training, I won't. When I want to fight again, want to compete again, I'll then, go through a bit more of the, oh, you should do because you've got this going on. But I'm not going to actively make myself like, oh, you've got to spar, you feel like shit, you can't go home now if you feel like shit, you've got to carry on. I'm just enjoying things. In jiu-jitsu, I feel you can be creative. You can play jiu-jitsu, you can't play MMA. I think that's the real sort of thing.
So, I don't know about that. I think you can play MMA if you're John Jones.
Well, it depends on your training partners. It depends on okay, that's an interesting point. I get where you're coming from with this. And when I say play MMA, it depends on the environment and your sparring partners. If you've got people who aren't going to spar competitively, I'm going to choice of words, they want to spar technically. That's the athlete's way of talking. If they don't want to beat the shit out of you, they want to play around and stuff, touch about the park. You can try stuff, do something different. Yeah. And it's not stressful. Whereas if you're with the athletes who are fighting on cage warriors and all this and the other, you think, okay,
of course,
it's going to be a very long round and I'm going to go home feeling not very happy. So again, it's very like case by case, but that general mindset of, okay, if I'm doing MMA, I'm doing it not because it's fun. I feel like, okay, this is work. This is a bit more serious. Whereas jiu-jitsu, I take as more of, this is fun. This is something I can play with. I can enjoy. I don't treat gi jiu-jitsu as part of MMA training. I treat it as something, just a bit of fun. This is separate. And it's this weird distinction I kind of draw somewhere. Like, what's your view in that transition between the two anyway?
Between gi, jiu-jitsu and MMA?
Well, just jiu-jitsu and MMA as a whole, like strict.
So I think that the reason why I stopped striking and did jiu-jitsu full time is because I didn't want to get hit in the head anymore.
Pretty fair,
And I think that the massive difference I see from striking sports and the stresses of striking sports and the stresses of jiu-jitsu is the damage. The potential of damage. As you say, you're going to go and you're a sparring partner for a Cage Warriors fighter, whoever it is, doesn't matter, right? Cage Warriors, one of the biggest, if not the biggest European promotion right now. 96 fighters, actually wrote an article about them earlier today. 96 fighters into the UFC. Morgan Charrier, if he wins the featherweight title, is probably the next one. So that'd be 97, right? Amazing promotion. Great to go and watch. I've got a lot of time for Graham Boylan, blah, blah, blah. You're stepping into the cage or the ring or the mat with a caged fence to have a 5-minute round against a Cage Warriors fighter. You're well aware of what's coming. What's coming is somebody's going to try and inflict their will. If you've got a heavy wrestler, they're going to try and take you down and beat the shit out of you on the ground, right? And sure, then maybe they're not going to try and stop you with the same ferocity that they try and stop somebody actually in their fight because they need you for the second round. But they're still going to take you down. They're still going to make your day shit, right? If you're coming with an explosive striker, a good boxer, a technical grappler, either way, like, you know that what's coming is heat and risk with damage, real damage. The only thing that straight grapplers would be able to sort of understand.
I'm leaking. Bear with me a second.
That's fine. No worries.
I've got wipes here. Carry on.
Is that when people start to shoot for a heel hook and people don't know how to defend heel hooks. They freak out, right? That same freak out is similar to when you've got head kicks flying at you, but you don't know how to defend them, right? But the stress of striking is what's different to the stress of grappling. I completely agree with you that you can play jiu-jitsu, but again, if you're going up against a guy that's getting ready for a competition, whether it be ADCC trials, which is the nearest one in a couple of weeks, or they're going to the Worlds, or they're going to Europeans, or they're just going to a London Open, whatever it is, they're still coming to take your head off, right? They're still coming to take your head off. But there's this decency in jiu-jitsu, which is tapping. And when you tap in jiu-jitsu, you're essentially saying, I'm submitting to death, right? Or I'm submitting to severe bodily harm. If somebody wraps up a rear naked choke and you tap, you're saying, fine, you've killed me. You're in a position that I would die if you continue.
Have you heard the Joe Rogan podcast? Who's talking about this? He's like Joe Rogan motivational thing.
Yeah. In jiu-jitsu, in MMA, it's different, right? Because you're deemed to be weak if you tap strikes, right? Obviously, GSP is the most common one, right? But look, the difference is the bravado and the risk and the stress involved. For me specifically, I much prefer jiu-jitsu now because I still get the competitive edge. I still get the endorphins. I still get the workouts. I still get the ability to use my body in weird ways, but I'm not worrying about taking any more shins to my jaw. And I think that that's something that is massively relieving for me, right?
Now, I like that a lot. And there's a lot of that. The reason I like a lot of that is where the distinctions are and where it sort of comes back on you as as an entity. And again, these kind of mindsets as to how you treat that training. So in jiu-jitsu, you get tapped quite a few times. You're quote unquote humbled and, you're better for it and you've learned and whatever other metaphors you want. Whereas MMA, you lost the round. You got beaten up. You're a loser.
Brain damage.
Well, again, not even just the actual physical damage, but like the emotional and the sort of mental side. Okay, here it is.
Yep.
You've lost the competition. Tough shit. Whereas in jiu-jitsu's case, okay, crack on, next person, this, that, and the other. And again, this whole idea of, again, intensity and the sort of wear and tear, like as you're saying, they're like damage in itself. And the stress. Like, sometimes I'm okay, but like most MMA rounds, I get gassed out of stress. Like, I'm fine, like, I crack on, get through them, but like, it's not very nice.
I agree. And I think that there's something to be said of dominance, right? Like, in MMA, there is the main goal, the main objective is to dominate your opponent, right? And dominate them in a fashion that you get nothing back. Nothing. You want to inflict enough damage and enough pressure and enough pace that your opponent has nothing to come back with. Now, a good example of this is Colby Covington versus Robbie Lawler, right? Now, obviously, Colby didn't finish Robbie, but what we saw Colby do is put so much pressure, so much pace, and dominate all areas of that match that Robbie was essentially reduced to cowering and waiting for a big right hand that never came. When Colby started to take his back, Robbie knew he wasn't going to choke him, so he didn't even bother to defend. Colby just wanted Robbie to start to stand up so he could take him back down again. And that is stressful. Really, really stressful. Whereas in jiu-jitsu, a lot of the time, jiu-jitsu players will allow you to do things just to catch you with something else. It's more of a cat and mouse game. To me, if I was to really describe it, MMA is like two bulldozers, and you're going to see which one breaks first. Jiu-jitsu is, if you're rolling with a high-level black belt, jiu-jitsu can be like a bulldozer. Like, it definitely can be. But if you're just rolling with your sparring partners, it's more like a cat and mouse, and it's just who's going to be the cat and who's going to be the mouse that game. That game, that round, that day, that training session. And that's kind of the level of stress that I look at it.
A word I feel was really, I don't know, specific to this, I feel is the word intention. Now, yes. What are you intending to do with what you're doing? Now, the reason I use that is, prime example with MMA, is where you get most of the submissions, isn't people going for the submissions. It's more a case of peppering them up and just wearing them out so they want to submit. So your intention is to make them want to quit. Whereas jiu-jitsu, you're intentionally trying to get the submission. You're intentionally trying to do certain things. And again, it's these extra layers of, you're not just trying to win, you're trying to make them want to lose. And there's extra layers of being broken down and dehumanized is a bit dramatic, but pretty much. You're trying to think, okay, I have been smushed.
It's very primal.
It's very,
very primal.
Sorry, I've got my tattoo's bleeding a little bit and I had a bit of a colour in it, so I got scared that my tattoo's going to fall off. I think it's like my...
Do you want to take a break and clean it up?
I think I'm all good. I think I've got it all sorted. Just, right. I'm one of these people like, okay, first thing, like, I'll tell you what, today, it was like my first competition. There was kind of nerves and butterflies and a bit of nervous energy. But I was excited. I was a bit giddy. Like, what are you like? Have you competed much in like jiu-jitsu?
So I competed way more in kickboxing than I have in jiu-jitsu. But it's definitely going to change as soon as, one, my weight comes back down, and two, I can get out of lockdown and start training properly again. But I am a really bad example of dealing with competition day nerves for jiu-jitsu. Really, really bad.
To what extent? What's your usual kind of, I don't know, mindset, and then again, end result?
So I've had to change it. I've tried experimenting with different ones various times, but what generally happens is I'll win a match or two, and then I'll get to the final and I'll talk myself out of the final. What happened in the last couple of competitions, I had a string of competitions. I did a London Warriors and then I did a Naga, and I got submitted in the first round twice by a DAS. So instantly I was like, I can never be submitted by a DAS again. But what happened in both of those, so the London Warriors one was a little bit difficult because I turned up and I was supposed to fight at 12. So I turned up about 11 to get weighed in and whatever. I didn't end up fighting until 6 p.m. So by that time, I was kind of like, I remember I said to my missus just before I stepped on the mat, I was like, I just want to get this over with. Like, I just want to go home. And what happened is, I mean, thankfully, I actually had the guy that submitted me on the podcast, and we had a chat about it. And I was like, look, at the end of the day, like, I just wanted to go home. And thankfully, he asked me in like 2 minutes or whatever it was. So, these things happen. But
got what you wanted.
But well, yeah, I did, like, and that's the point, right? I did get what I wanted. I did get to go home, and I got home because I didn't. And like, it's just terrible. It's terrible mentality. And even afterwards, I was like, for fuck's sake, like, that's not what I wanted to happen. Like, instant regret, instant shame, right? And the same at Naga. Like, I went and the difference at Naga is everything went well. The prep went well, the weight cut went well. Not that I really cut any weight, but everything went well. I turned up, had a little sleep with my missus, and got warmed up, went on the mat, and I just froze. Just froze. Like, my goal was to sit, pull. For people that don't know, like, pull guard means essentially touch hands with someone, grab something, and sit down. Like, so I did that.
Trying to wipe his ass.
Exactly. And like, I wanted to enter the legs instantly, but I just sat there and I just looked at him. I was like, all right, mate, what are we going to do? And he was like, I'm going to DAS you. And I was like, all right, pal, no worries. Cheers.
You want this one or this side?
Yeah, which one do you want? I'll just tell me which half guard side to go. I'll just jump there. It's fine.
Make sure Mrs. filming me. Make sure you got that sorted.
Yeah, and I got DASed, right? And I don't know what it is. I think it's a lack of confidence in myself, and a lot of the time I don't feel like I deserve to be there, right? So that comes out in my competition. But then when I roll with guys at the gym, and I then go see them go to competition, and they're picking up gold medals all over the place, I'm like, why can't I do that? Like, and I know it's all in here. It's all in here.
That hit home a bit too much, I feel, because that's very similar to me. And like, competition, like, guys who I have like back and forth with when they're winning medals, I'm thinking, oh, it should be me. And I'm thinking, why do I do stupid things? Why do I make this sort of, self-sabotaging things? And as of recently, I'm much better at being relaxing, having fun, and being better in competitions. But again, it's...
How do you do that?
I started having fun, and I started just, I don't know, I used to be very keyed up. Like, my first tournament was at Empire Grappling. I've heard your thing with Jake Cross as well. He was
big up Empire Grappling. Big up Jake Cross.
Yeah, out the man there. I went to his first one at Sugden Sports Centre when he had, I think, 3 mats. This is post Grapple Nation, first Empire Grappling, I think. And I was against a guy called Adam Haynes, a really sound guy. And if he didn't take me down, we'd still be standing now, because I was sort of staring at him like a deer in the headlights, gripping up, just a bit like, I don't know what I had planned, but I was just a bit, okay, now what? And then, so he got me down. I basically let him submit me, and then happened again in Nogi. I thought, fuck's sake, okay. That was the sort of the beginning of the end to most of my competitions at white belt. But blue belt, what I started doing was jumping flying triangles, and I started getting quite successful with that. And
Of course you did.
I started having a bit of fun with that. Being lanky as fuck anyway, it's just one of these ones. But also, it's a lot more, I don't know, because it's always a mix. Like, I would get more nervous for jiu-jitsu matches than MMA fights. I think jiu-jitsu intimidates me so much. I think it's the crowd. I think it's being on that ground level with everyone else. Whereas MMA, because I treat it because I treat MMA like a fight, and I treat the whole process differently. You're isolated. You're on a big weight cut. You got the day before. You got the whole nerves, the whole excitement, the whole energy. And because I want to be there, and I get in there and I have fun and this, that, and the other. Jiu-jitsu is like, okay, bag of nerves. And also, like, I don't know, I just couldn't settle. Whereas now it's just a bit of fun. And like, I don't take it personally, but in the same breath, it's that extra kind of venom. And it's all learning. And I say it's all learning in a very, not cliche sense, but in a sense of, okay, I like to think my knowledge is the latest software of what I've got. And the current
John Kavanagh, respect.
There we are. He knows. This sort of idea of, okay, this is what I know. This is what I think I know. But at this point, this is how I'm making progression. And it went from, if I try and treat like a big fight, I'll stress myself out too much and won't be able to get going. And then the counter side to that is, if I'm too relaxed, I can't get going in the first place. And this is a huge reason why most of my podcasts go around the topic of mindset, not mental prep, but that kind of side of, okay, showing up on game day. And it's just sort of how people deal with it in different ways. And some of it's visualization, some of it's just ignorance is bliss. And it's a mix of things, because I'm an overthinker. And very much, I think most of my competitions, the night before, I've been on Jiu-Jitsu's YouTube channel trying to find takedowns for no-gi, takedowns for gi, and then I pull guard anyway. I think, what the fuck do I look at those takedowns for? It's a bit like, okay, it is what it is. But yeah, a lot of it is trial and error and just having fun is what's getting me further. But regards to getting me even further now, it's, I think, more structured game plans and more animosity I want to feel. But again, it's all getting them in and making it work, and I don't know, finding my style with it. Like, what's your kind of plans for your development in your competition sort of stuff?
To compete more. Just compete more. Like, you know, I think you're right that it's all about learning, right? It's about testing grounds. Because I mean, I will answer the question on this, but I just have a separate question for you, and that's like, what's the goal? What's your goal eventually? Is your goal, like, what is your goal eventually in your combat sports career? What is it? What's your goal?
So I'll answer this even more annoyingly than you answering that question. And the way I'm going to do this is, success is very arbitrary. And success is very like, okay, if I get a belt, is that enough? It's 2 belts enough, and so on and so forth. So it's constant progression, constant development, and just enjoying it. So whilst I train, I have no ambitions to be full-time athlete in any particular thing. But whilst I'm training full-time anyway, outside of working full-time, I want to try and compete as much as I can, compete in MMA, and just steadily progress, get medals, get belts, and enjoy it and keep on progressing. So there's no definitive, this is my end goal, I need to get ADCC medal or get a fight on Polaris or whatever. It's just, I don't know, there's no end point as such. It's just constantly competing and just testing myself.
Okay, so I'll then wrap round back to the question. So your question was, how do I plan to grow, right? Well, this ties in with what my goal is. So eventually, I would like to be a coach at some point. I would like to either own a gym or work in a gym teaching jiu-jitsu. That's what I'd like to do. So in terms of me getting better, I want to gain experience and I want to win things. I want to know what it feels like to win things. But that's not just for me. That's so that I have an understanding so I can impart that knowledge to somebody else at some point. How I actually plan to do that is I think you've touched on a big one, and that's a game plan, right? Like, it's pointless for me to go into a competition, touch hands with the guy, sit down and literally do what I did before and just be like, what do you want to do then, pal? Because at that point, like, if we're adopting Ashley Williams' mentality, I've already lost. Because I've taken my turn and then I've said to him, your turn. And he's like, okay, DOS choke, cheers. So game planning is huge. And I think reps of game planning is important. And I think that something that I would like to do, that John Kavanagh does a lot, but I don't see happen a lot in jiu-jitsu gyms, is to try and replicate the competition scene as much as possible. Right?
Fight simulation.
So if people don't know, what John does is he blacks out the room. He has the cage with the cage lights. He has like a fake crowd behind, or he'll have the guys at the gym turn up. Your walkout music will play. You'll walk from the changing rooms. You'll come in the cage, and he will be the referee. And then you'll have your corners, whoever it is, and you compete, right? You compete as if it's a fight. And his idea for that is that you get used to the nerves, used to the scenario, you'll get used to everything else. I think he even said he had like Bruce Buffer, like noises, like, the main event type thing. I'm like, that's phenomenal if so. But in the jiu-jitsu situation, it would be good as well, right? Like competition classes, to me, the way that a lot of them happen in jiu-jitsu gyms is basically you just try and batter each other a little bit harder than you tried to batter each other before. But I think having some actual structure to that, to really get you used to people trying to submit you. Because I find what happens a lot in rolling portions of classes is you roll, don't get me wrong, you want to submit the person, but you're not putting it on them 100%, which is what happens at competition. At competition, people actually try to submit you all the time. And in the gym, I think people are a little bit more playful than that. Maybe your experience is different. This is obviously just my experience. But the thing that I want to get better at is I want to get better at dealing with the nerves. And that's the first part of that, is just accepting that I have them. And the second part is having a game plan. Having a game plan of, okay, if I'm going to pull guard, what am I going to do after that? If I'm going to wrestle, what am I looking for in my wrestling? What grips am I looking for? What ties am I looking for? What stance am I looking for? What foot positioning do I want my opponent to have? And then from there, just going. Because I think a lot of what happens, and you will know this of 6 years of training, sometimes you do something in a role that you weren't intending to do, you just did it. And getting to that flow state of where you're not thinking specifically about, okay, I want to do this, therefore I need to do this, and just seeing and feeling the opportunities and taking them as they come, that's what I'd like to replicate in the competition.
So there's 3 points I want to make with this. First one is from a coaching goal perspective. Mm-hmm. How important, and if so, which achievements do you feel is required to then coach?
So I think achievements are important from a marketing perspective. For me personally, I don't care too much. Like, not really. I don't put on myself that I need to win a Europeans title or a British Open title or this or that and the next thing. I don't put that self on me. I think what's more important is experience. However, if on your Instagram bio, whatever, it says opening a gym, black belt world champion coach, that sounds better to a person that doesn't know anything about jiu-jitsu to black belt coach, trained 15 years, competed everywhere. It sounds very different. So whilst I'm not saying to myself, as you mop up your tattoo, as I'm not saying to myself, I need to win the worlds, I need to win ADCC, I need to win the trials, I need to win this, I need to win that. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is I need to garner as much experience as possible.
Now, there's an interesting sort of thing, because again, we're going back to our original points of the podcast. This is why I asked this point of, okay, their own podcast versus marketing to the ability that it should be, giving it its own recognition it deserves, whilst also retaining your own integrity and your own values. So I'll give you an example from guys from my gym. So we have a guy called JB Graham, who coaches all the sort of professional like K1 and Muay Thai guys, and all the guys are fighting professional, kickboxing coach, phenomenal. I think he's had one fight, if that. So he's managed to achieve all that as a coach and build this kind of, I don't know, these relationships and they get these sort of achievements without having that, his own fight career behind him. And the flip side of that, our MMA coach, Danny Batten, he's former Cage Warriors champion. He's beaten John Kavanagh, all this kind of stuff. So two people who have built people up with different kind of backgrounds. And again, it's interesting how you then, because again, you get all the sort of, I tell you what fucks me up the most is people who say like UFC veteran or competitive and thinking, this is that fucking years ago. I mean, you just got this t-shirt. I mean, you're not Conor McGregor. I get you've had one UFC fight, and I get it's a big deal, but like, get over it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the marketing thing, right? Like, let's not get it twisted.
That's exactly what it is. It's 100%. So you get your casuals. They walk in saying, "I want to do this. Where am I going to go? Okay, who coaches there? Oh, they've got 4 achievements. Who's got 5? Let's go to 5. They don't think. They don't care. They just go. And it's obviously not everyone, but for the sake of conversation's sake, that's how it goes. Now, my next point to you there is when it comes to your competition prep and mindset, back to the many, many mantras I like. One is how you do anything is how you do everything. And I think this is very, very poignant. And also, it's interesting because when it comes to competition, I like how you sort of describe the adrenaline and that being a huge factor of it. Because I find as soon as I've had my first match, there onwards, it's fun and happy days. First match, absolute hell. I've got lead in all my arms. I can't do anything. I'm absolutely spent. Don't know why. It is what it is. And in the gym, the competition classes in themselves, again, it's just essentially more of a cardio kind of burnout sessions. And it's more how you then emulate that kind of, I don't know, animosity, but more tension and that fight simulation. It's a weird one to try and emulate. I've had it in a few schools where they've had a sort of faux tournament of, okay, you from that end, like Matt, John, you guys, bow, here's a scoreboard, do it in front of everyone. And that was the closest kind of thing to it. And that seemed to be pretty sufficient. But even then, some people kind of thrive with that. And it's a bit of a funny one to try and emulate. And I feel that, I don't know, it's more, I feel the game plan's the way around that. The same with, this is how I sort of speak to people who have like anxiety, how to try and, when people are sort of struggling to try and help manage it. Again, it's a huge spectrum, but a lot of it is try and control what you can control. If you're panicking so much about the competition that they've got the day after tomorrow, it is, my sort of things, okay, have you got everything packed, everything ready to go? Is your weight okay? Cool. Okay, so if you need to physically write out your game plan, obviously don't show your fucking opponents, but just for your own sake of mind, I'm going to get a grip. I'm going to sit on my ass. I'm going to get De La Riva hook. From there onwards, it's autopilot. Getting that first step, then you just sort of work it out from there onwards. Obviously, it doesn't have to get the grip, but by that point, you've got some sort of semblance of plan. And then you kind of figure out, like, I don't know, how rigid do you want a game plan? Because again, if you've got this whole sort of, okay, I'm going to get my butterfly hook, I'm going to do half butterfly, I'm going to elevate him there, I'm going to get the saddle, but he's going to roll this way, but I'm going to get this and this, that, and the other. Then what? How far into it is too much?
Yeah, I agree. And I think a game plan should be based on 2 things: a set of micro goals and macro goals. So your macro goal, for instance,
took that out of my head. It's the wording I use. Go on, I love it. Go on.
Yeah. So for instance, let's use the Max Holloway Alexander Volkanovski fight, right? Because this is an absolutely phenomenal showing of macro and micro goals. Is that conceptually the fight didn't look from if you really weren't looking at it, it didn't look massively dissimilar, other than Max Holloway managed to knock him down twice in the first 2 rounds, and Max is a bit more aggressive. Fine. But from a macro perspective, Max made a big adjustment with the leg kicks and his stance. So his stance changed to make the leg kicks harder to hit. And he said to himself, I'm going to walk through the pain of the leg kicks and I'm going to return with as many leg kicks as he hits me. So the judges have to see that as even. Fine. Big macro change. The micro changes, however, were his foot placement, his distance management, the shot selection that he had. Those things, his coaches would have been like, he's there for the knee. He's there for the uppercuts. He's there for the floating left hands. Fine. But with Max having these concepts in his head, he's not then going in and only ever looking for a knee, a left hook, and an uppercut, right? So you set yourself these macro and micro achievements, or goals, or whatever it is you want to call them. So your macro achievement in a jiu-jitsu match would be make weight, first thing. Second thing is going to be, if you want to pull guard, it's pulling guard and entering in a guard that you feel comfortable with. Your micro achievements will be, well, I'd like to make sure that I can gather the knee line for a heel hook and keep it. I don't want him to roll out straight away. If he rolls, I want to keep the knee line. This is a micro thing. A micro thing will be, I need to make sure that my hand fighting is more prominent than his hand fighting. Fine. And setting those things as a game plan, because as you say, if you set something as rigid as I'm going to sit, get half butterfly, elevate him, sit to my saddle, and then if as you go to saddle, he knee cuts you,
No
then
more.
what?
Yeah, get asked and
You're
go
fucked.
crying.
Yeah, like what are you going to do? Just sit, move to turtle? What are you going to do? Like, so I agree that a rigid game plan. Again, this is all about balance, right? Pardon the pun, but
Here we go.
it is. It's all about sitting in the middle and having
Chaos and order.
something that I can speak about in theory, but I've not yet been able to put in practice.
Now, this is a very, very, very hot topic for me as well, is how much of it is do as I say, not as I do, and also this idea of, okay, just because I haven't been able to do it myself, it doesn't mean what I'm saying isn't true. And that's something I really struggle with. This is something I really struggle with. When I hear a technique, this is what fucks me off so much. If, like, I see a technique the coach has taught, I'm regurgitating it word for word to my training partner who's doing it wrong. But because they're a higher belt, they almost disregard what's being said. I'm thinking, this isn't about me. Monkey do, monkey see. I see monkey see, monkey do that. Monkey say do this. I just get a bit like, okay, I get that you're a higher rank. I get you're more experienced. I get you've won more matches, but you're doing it wrong. So you fucking sort it out.
Yep. I mean, one of the greatest things that I've heard, and this was actually from Ross Nichols, and I was very privileged to spend a car journey with Ross Nichols up to Leeds and back again. And I was talking to him about competition because the way that he rolls is something that I love. He rolls in a way that is as if he's just woken up and somebody's asked him to fight him. And he's like, okay, fine. He rolls so effortlessly and it's so fluid and it's so beautiful. And I said to him, like, how do you prep for matches? What do you do? And he's like, I get to the arena, I weigh in, I go and find a corner, I put my headphones on, I sleep. They call me for my match. I wake up, I take my headphones off and I roll. And I'm like, do you warm up? He's like, you'll never see me in the bullpen. I just turn up and then I roll. And he's like, but don't take my advice, never do that.
I love Ross Nichols. I think it's just the Welsh guys. They love it. They seem to get it. They seem to get it sussed.
I agree, but like what Ross has done is he's taken a lot of his time to develop that style because that style works for him. And I actually had a conversation with Bradley Hill who had something similar. He's like, I did matches where I turned up and on the tube I fell asleep and then I won double gold. And then I tried it again for the Knox competition. I got knocked out in the first round. I've tried matches where I've mean mugged all my opponents and been like, you're getting it, and then you're getting it. And then I win double gold and I do the same thing and I lose in the first round. He's like, for him, his game plan is I'm just going to see how I feel on the day and I'll act accordingly. And, you know, again, there we've got two serious high-level competitors and both of them have stark different game plans. And I think, as you've said, rightly said, it's just because somebody says something that doesn't work for you doesn't mean it's not right. And this goes for, this can be, you know, communicated across so many facets of life, right?
Now, again, there's so much in all of this, and I absolutely love that. Now, let's break down a few of these things. So Bradley Hill, prime example. His match against Shane Curtis, shout out Shane Curtis, one of the homies.
Yep.
My friend Shane, as we're talking about that match in itself, their first match in the Polaris knockout tournament.
Yep.
We're saying about how he psyched himself out and how you can get in your own head in this whole thing of, okay, you're competing against high-level guys all the time, but when the big stage comes up, it's how you then approach that. And now you take that's Shane's perspective on that. Now, I've got no idea how Bradley felt before that match.
Yeah, of course.
They're on the same platform, except there's a different, obviously, experience behind them. And also, this is a side note from Shane. I don't know if I think he said this in the podcast, but apparently Bradley's mount is unlike anything else. And it looks horrible.
I can imagine.
It looks horrible, and I don't want anything near that. I don't want to know about that, and I'll leave him to that. But again, just that kind of, again, it's not Plato's thing of forms. It's the same thing, but being perceived differently. And these different concepts. And that's where things get interesting. And this is where the whole thing of nothing is wrong. Now, nothing is right and nothing is wrong. And it's very unsettling for someone who likes things to be right and wrong. But it's accepting, okay, this is what works for some people and it's very specific. And I hate it, but it's so accurate. I'm very much like, I want things to be nice and organized. I love good, clean, organized fun. And when things aren't good, clean, and organized, I'm not very happy. It might have been fun, but it is what it is. It's trying to be a bit more okay. I like to use analogies like, like stats meters. Like, you play like an RPG or something like that. You've got very much like, okay, you've got these bars, this, that, and the other. And it's trying to get your balance of things. And this is why one of Jordan Peterson's things is compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to someone else's today. Because of the amount of variances, the amount of different factors, like say your agility is there, mine's there, this, that, and the other. Like, it makes no sense to compare a stat there when all the other stats are completely out of sync. And it's then this whole situation. This is why I like started doing breakdowns with people against their own matches with both people there.
Amazing idea.
The way they've perceived it is almost worlds apart, and it's so interesting. I've done it in my own fights as well, just to try and like save a bit of face and think, this is really annoying because my first fight, I did that with my opponent. I could break down on the guy who organised it, and I didn't record because it was early days of podcasting, and I fucked up a bit because Max is shit for recording podcasts for some reason, but here we are. But it was really interesting the way we sort of broke it down. It was the first time we spoke about it, and I love it. And I love that kind of humility of, okay, I wanted to kill you, but now we're chatting like we're just mates, and it's just completely fine. That's always a weird transition.
I agree, and actually, like Alex was one of my podcast guests, and we spoke about that. But I think there's a couple of things just to break down here. I think that let's just revisit slightly the nothing is wrong, nothing is right, kind of. So nothing is wrong, nothing is right, merely the perception of which is wrong or right. However, that differs from society to society. In some societies, it's right to murder. It's okay to murder. In some societies, paedophilia is wrong, right? These are what we have laws for. So whilst in some way, and the analogy that I'll use for this is words, right? There is no good or bad word. There is no negative or positive word. Merely the intent, the context, and the perception of the word is good or bad. An action is somewhat similar. However, we have come across some Immanuel Kant universal maxims of things that we determine to be right or wrong. Now, again, they differ based on your ethical and moral compass, your mental situation, and a whole host of other variables. So whilst I agree predominantly that nothing is right or wrong, we can't say that as an absolute. We can't say that as a maxim, because there are things that we would both agree to be wrong, and we could ask a large perception of people and they would argue that it is wrong. And equally, there would be some people that may argue that it's right? So that's why it's difficult to say that it is a maxim or isn't a maxim. And on the match with Shane and Bradley, look, I mean, I know Shane as well, and nowhere near to the level that you do, but I've had a couple of chats with him, and I've had the pleasure of rolling with Bradley, right? I say the pleasure.
Pleasure's a bit of a loose term, yeah.
Yeah, an ironic term. Like, let me tell you, that motherfucker is incredible. He's absolutely incredible. When you roll with him, I mean, what happened, at least in mine, or what my perception of how that roll was, is he allowed me to do whatever I want and then showed me that it just doesn't work. Right?
Oh, I can empathize with that so much. It's just so horrible.
Like, I think that Shane should take no, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, there's nothing bad about what happened in that match, right? You went up against a really seasoned, really good black belt and you lost. Fine. He then went on, fought Empire Grappling and got a win. It's fine. These things happen, right? One of my favorite sayings in MMA is these things happen in MMA, right? And these things happen in MMA at the end of the day. Like, you go out, you put on your performance and you lost.
What it is.
That's okay. It is what it literally is what it is. And, maybe Shane gets that match back one day and maybe the result is different. Maybe it's not. We don't know. We'd have to wait and see. But, I think, I just think that the perception of things, as you say, is massive. It really is massive.
So let's break down this even further. I don't know where this conversation started, but here we go. Let's keep this going. So the concepts of things being definitively right or wrong. And again, I get where you're coming from in that point of norms and values, especially society kind of thing. We agree that certain things are laws, certain things we can and can't do. So this is where you get this sort of societal Venn diagram of, okay, we agree these things are definitely bad, whereas certain things you can sort of perceive in this, that, and the other. And where the question really sort of came from, the sort of statement comes from, it's more the concept of something I had with Martin Stapleton, the Cage Warriors former, I think he's lightweight champ. And again, it's this whole
Stapleton, yeah.
He knows. Listen to everyone listening now. Listen to my podcast with 50 Cal Stapleton. Try not to be motivated. It's so hard. He's just so like so many things. And one thing was not to think in absolutes. Nothing is good or bad. Nothing is final. Nothing is this, that, and the other. I think it really resonates now. Certain things final, in a sense of like, you know, so prime example. There's an old fable, even to call it. It's a story of a man. His son falls off a horse, breaks his leg, and the town people say, this is a much shorter down version, breaks his leg and say it's such a horrible thing, it's so bad. And he says, maybe. But then there's a war, and he can't go to war because he's injured, broke his leg. So is his leg being broken a good or a bad thing? Because, you know, he didn't go to war and didn't die. So, and these whole things of, okay, you don't really know. You don't know yet. Yeah. And so obviously like death and things like final, but more in a sense of, you know, concepts of, is something really bad or worse? Are you losing your competition coming up? You think that's going to be good or bad? You think, oh shit, I lost. Or is it all that mistake you made there helped you progress to get bigger and a higher platform? And again, it's more of a, there's always caveats. Much like the thing in itself is nothing is final. Same with these things. It's always evolving with new stimulus, and you're not going to evolve with new stimulus. You're going to be left behind and very ignorant and very, you know, arrogant.
Yeah, I think essentially what's happening in a lot of the statements that you talk about is that people are picking a side, right? Like, of course, there are things that are absolute in that there are things that are final. The only thing that I would determine to be final is death. But even death, there is life, and there cannot be one without the other. And that's why I think things like, you know, Taoist philosophy and stuff like that relates to me quite well, is because there cannot be one thing without the other all of the time. Like, it's bad for you that you lost, but it's good for your opponent because he won. You know, it could be bad that you broke your leg, but as you've said, it's good that you didn't get to go to war, right? There is always the other side of everything. Whether we can view it, whether we can retain it, whether we can understand it, is a completely different set of variables and conversations. But there cannot be one thing without the other, almost all of the time. And I think that's something that people don't choose to look at a lot of the time.
Now, if I keep bringing things back to chaos and order about balance, I think we're going to go in a bit of a loop here. But again,
sure.
It's very much, I like the way how you're not picking apart as a bit too of an aggressive term, but more a case of
I'm not looking to do that.
No, you know what I mean, like dissecting a bit more, because again, what I'm saying is more of a case of a generalism, and you'll get more specific in that. And I like that. And I like being, I'm going to say challenged, but lack of a better choice of words. It does not mean to come across as defensive.
I'm not challenging you at all.
No. It won't be too hard to pick apart what I'm saying anyway. It's not overly like, you know, complex and defensive, but it's nice having that bit more of a, tell you what I hate the most is an echo. I don't want people saying, I don't want yes people. I don't like people who just go middle of the road. And this is the distinction between middle of the road and having a balance. And this is something I've really appreciated throughout this conversation now, is because initially when you're saying about trying to view it from the middle perspective, is almost that fear of being on the fence. But I like the way how it's not that. It's more, you may sit on the fence from a vocal opinion, but internally you're processing both sides. You're being aware of it. You're not just sort of saying, okay, this is safe. This is what I'm going to say. It's okay. I'm not giving an opinion until I've assessed both the whole situation. And it's good not having that kind of bias, that kind of like, okay, you're aware of the situation. And this is something that I feel is, again, you can take that into a lot of different scenarios. And okay, say we take competitions. We'll go back to jiu-jitsu, keep it back on like fighting, everything else. Okay, so here we are. We think we've got a competition. I've got my mindset, this, that, and the other. And the way you want to perceive that, it becomes, okay, this is a fight. This is a match. That in itself is an argument and a debate that's just so irrelevant and so fucking annoying and so pointless. But anyway, again, in itself, okay, so you've got the whole macro situation. What I'm going to be doing is a fight or it's going to be a match. the micros even in that is going to be like decisions regards of how I approach the individual people, and then always this, that, and the other. And you've got everyone else in your bracket having the same kind of thing. And then it's the whole mixing pot, and then the new stimulus. So take what I mean by the new stimulus is the variabilities. So you, like you said with your matches, say you're all getting there for 12. Your mindset is, okay, I've done my weight cut, rehydrated or whatever, have a bunch of cut, you've got your food prepped. You think, I don't need to bring anything, I'll get there, fight, go home, this, that, and the other. So you get there 12. Okay, we've had some delays. These things have moved around. You're fighting at 4. So, okay, we've got 4 hours now. I need to get some food. Always. So you've got these sort of spanners in the works. You've got these variables to play around with. And then these added layers of how you then react to the new stimulus and how you perceive that. And the reason I'm going on this tangent is more not living things as final. And by not leaving things as final, I mean, okay, is it good or bad this has been moved back? I'm annoyed because I expected something good. However, if this then deters my opponents, makes them also feel in the same situation, if I then take it from a different perspective, I can then have that advantage. I could be at base while they're underneath. And then if I've already prepped anyway, if I needed to get something anyway, things will work out quite nicely. And again, it's all very much, without going on the same kind of waffle and the same kind of tangents and the same subjects, it's more the case of giving yourself that time to reflect. What that really means is not making that decision straight away. Like, your decision to react to something is very instinctive, and I make the mistake on a daily basis, and I still do it with little things. Like, someone cuts you up, you think, oh, you're a wanker. Yes, but also you think, okay, was that annoying? Maybe. Am I okay? Yep. Why is that? Why is this even a point of getting annoyed about? In the moment, you're emotionally invested. And a huge factor I always find was always a good thing to reflect on is it's very easy to make an opinion from a mutual or neutral, unaffected point of view. Like, if someone calls you, I don't know, kind of whatever, and you react, you think, okay, yeah, I'm really annoyed, I'm really offended. Whereas if I tell you it happened to someone else, you don't care, you're not affected by it, you're not angry. And then you can be a lot more reasonable. So, no, take the higher ground, just go for a walk. Whereas if it's you, then, oh, where is it? And again, it's very much trying to perceive it. Now, before we go off of me waffling even longer, Pantheon. Talk to me about Pantheon. So how did that come about with you?
Sure. So I will finish off just a couple of points that you said, and then I'll move on to Pantheon. So, excuse me, sorry. Yeah, I agree that the middle is not a cop-out. The middle is not sitting on the fence. The way I determine the middle is that actually the middle, a lot of the time, puts you in a relatively lonely space because you're not taking sides to the extreme that other people generally do. And this isn't a higher than thou bullshit ego opinion. It's merely what I'm trying to do is assess, as you rightly say, assess both options, assess both sides, determine what most aligns to me, and then going with that. It could be, excuse me, sorry. It could be that both of my determinations of both sides are completely wrong. And I take an action and it's still wrong, right? But at least you're ethically sound in that you're attempting. The intent is to understand both sides and then make a determined viewpoint based on those both sides. So yeah, I completely agree with you. So Pantheon. So I am extremely good friends with Liam Khan. Liam Khan and Sam Townend were the two directors of Pantheon. I met Liam when he really, really graciously allowed me to take one of the last places on a Firas Zahabi seminar at Scramble Academy Leeds. And I was very, very fortunate. It was like 2 days before the seminar, and I messaged him on Facebook and I was like, look, I really want to be there. Is there any chance that I could get a spot? And he's like, we've got 2 left. They're generally left for the academy, but if you can pay me now, you can have it. And I was like, bang it, I'll do it. Went up, met him, and from there they say the rest is history, right? So as I say, I've been good friends with Liam for a while. I went to Pantheon 1 as a spectator. I did Pantheon 2 as like a runner, like, collecting athletes and going around and grabbing walkie-talkies and getting water and all that kind of stuff. And then afterwards, Liam said to me, do you want to be a part of it? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, matchmaking, I have a relatively good knowledge of the jiu-jitsu scene in the UK, not to the level of someone like Nathan Kay, not to the level of other people, but I it's something that I enjoy. It's something that I invest my time into. So I said to Liam, I'd love to. Initially, I started by just running the Instagram account and doing some of the media stuff along with Rolling Shutter, who's like the head cameraman there. If people don't know Rolling Shutter, go and check his Instagram out at Rolling Shutter _. And then it's kind of grown that me and Liam do the matchmaking together. And, you know, the card that we were going to put on, Pantheon 3, before the lockdown in Birmingham, had some absolutely phenomenal fights. It was going to be Ash Williams and Gio Martinez for Ash's title. And we were going to do Victor Hugo versus Felipe Andrew in an open weight contest. And obviously, Felipe Andrew and Victor Hugo have fought twice since then. And we've seen what sort of stuff that Victor Hugo's been able to pull out in the Third Coast Grappling Kumites and whatever. So, you know, that was a match that I was really proud that we pulled off, and Liam did so much hard work on that match. And that was going to be amazing, because it would have been an introduction to what Felipe and what Victor's abilities are. But for me, Pantheon, how I got involved is that, you know, I was invited onto the board of directors by Liam, and here I am, essentially. Like, what I try to bring is something that really is at the ethos, the base ethos of Pantheon is giving jiu-jitsu athletes a platform where they can, one, earn good money, earn fair money for what they're doing, you know, obviously relative to the budgets that we have. And it's also to grow and build up and coming athletes. You know, the blue belts, the purple belts, the white belts that are coming through. Like, I want to make sure that we give them a platform where they can build and they can grow. So one day, you know, it's not just Theon, Ash, Ross, Bradley, etc. that are out on the biggest stages representing the UK. It's that we've got 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 guys that are bidding for places at ADCC trials and worlds and all this sort of stuff. So, yeah.
Again, there's so much in this I want to break down. So start with that kind of, we'll work backwards. So yeah, that sure. Kind of that mindset of trying to build up the future of the UK scene. Now, There's a huge thing I like about Cage Warriors is that is the biggest platform of a professional thing to then get up to the UFC. 100%. And now to extend on that, they then got the academy. So not only have you also got like the combination of the high profile and the low profile professionals in the card, you now got the amateurs from like debut to like veterans that are going to be in the professional scene and this rest of the other. And then you take that to a sort of jiu-jitsu point of view. Like, take things like Empire Grappling, like you have like good old Liam Cannon against Ben Hills, you also have white belts and this, that and the other. So it's good to have that kind of mix in the same kind of card. So I've got a lot of time and respect for that. And on top of that in itself, I went to Pantheon to corner my friend Richard Burns, who got the Fat W in his fighting next weekend over in Norwich. Shout out Rich.
Yeah, Richard had a great match.
Now, this is unrelated, kind of. That was the hottest event I've ever been to. I thought I was going to die.
I think I lost 2.5 kilos that night.
It was so hot. So anyone who isn't aware, wouldn't go to that event. It was at the warehouse project, over it was, or in Leeds. And it was one of the hottest days ever. And if you think how hot it is, this is back in the days before social distancing. This is, you know, good old days. And it's just a big sweaty nightclub, but not at the evening. No, like lunchtime. And everyone's just in this club. Oh God, it was so hot and so muggy. But anyway, yeah, it was. I really like the sort of format. It was so good.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's something that we're always trying to improve, right? And me and Liam have been having some chats recently about rule sets and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, I just want to give a quick shout out to Empire as well. We actually did Road to Pantheon, what was called Road to Pantheon, where we basically we gave guys an opportunity to compete under the Empire bracket, kind of. But whoever won that would get a match on Pantheon. So that is something that, you know, we've also done because those guys weren't black belts necessarily. And, you know, the guy that eventually won it was a guy called Liam Alpang. He was a blue belt at the time. He's now a purple belt, I believe. And, you know, we'll get Liam on the match and we'll get Liam on the card whenever we can get him on the card and everything will be grand. But, you know, something that I would like to do eventually when we've got the budget and the notoriety is something like Cage Warriors Academy, like Pantheon Academy or something like that, you know, because at the end of the day, there's plenty of blue belt level talent out there that can put on a show, but may not make it on one of the largest invitationals where they want the cream of the crop black belts, the big names, the big brands. And, you know, the likes of Riotolo brothers are really an outcast because those guys aren't blue belts, and frankly, they're not purple belts now either. Like, you know, if you can go toe to toe for 15 minutes with Ash Williams, you're probably not a purple belt. Like at your weight class, he's a very good grappler, and these guys, you know, they've been out, and let's see what they do on the Kumite this weekend. But those guys are very, very good, and they're outliers. But you know, there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 blue belts that I'd love to give a match on Pantheon, but you know, because of what Pantheon is, we're predominantly trying to get the highest production value for our athletes and the highest production value for our customers, our viewers. So that's why we lean towards the black belts and the brown belts and these kind of people. But look, it's absolutely within mine and Liam's ethos that we want to give the younger grapplers, the less experienced, the lower grade grapplers an opportunity as well. Absolutely.
And that all being said as well, when it comes to the matchmaking side of it, how do you like to pair up styles, for example? So say, is it a case of, I don't know, because you say like a random tournament bracket, for example, you get all sorts of mixes of matches. You can get 2 prospects who can get knocked out by absolute nobodies. And you can get, again, an absolute barn burner on paper that turns to be an absolute stall fest, like 50-50 kind of scissoring. And you're like, what's going on here? No one's doing anything. Like, what's your usual ethos for trying to, is it clashing of styles? Is it, what's your sort of, I don't know.
It's quite multifaceted, right? So it all depends on where they've competed, what weight they're at, what their injury state is. What me and Liam will generally do is we'll put together a dream card, right? And that dream card will be 10, 12, 14, 16 fights. And we'll then say, okay, of this dream card, how many of these people are available? 1, and 2, willing to take a match. If the answer is yes to both of those things, then we move them on and then they become part of the card, right? We can then negotiate things like purses and flights and accommodations and all this sort of stuff, whatever. But predominantly, what I try to do is I try to look at the landscape and I say, okay, so Jed and Ellis Younger competed on Empire Grappling, right? That would have been a phenomenal match for the next Pantheon, but it's been done. Cool. Well, both of those guys came out looking really good. Their stock was still high. Nobody got trounced. It was a really close, entertaining match. Well, let's see what happens with Jed now. What does he want to do? Where does he go? Does he feature on the new Polaris? If he does, who does he match again? Same again with Ellis. Like, does he go on Polaris when they go out? What about Grapple Fest? Like, let's see what happens, right? So based on what happens in the scene, based on what these guys are looking for in their careers, right? If we want to put them on the card, if they're in our dream card, if they're in our scope, we'll speak to them and we'll be like, look, these are the names that we like. These are the styles that we like. These are the ideas we have for you. What do you want to do? Like what? Because as we say, at the end of the day, this is about building the athletes, right? So if Jed's like, I want Gordon Ryan, I'll be like, cool, you can stump the money up and you can bring him over, right? Like we ain't got the money for that guy. But you know, if he calls out somebody, whoever it is, and we like that match and we think it's a better match, a better styles matchup than we have, we'll take that initiative. You know, but predominantly me and Liam will put our heads together. We're big jiu-jitsu nerds and we're going to try and put a match that's going to be a style clash, as you said. For instance, like when Fred and Jed had a match at Pantheon, both of those are phenomenal leg lockers. And we did see some leg lock battle, but what we also saw was a massive respect for each other's ability to leg lock the other. So we saw some differentiation in the scrambles. We saw some armbar attempts. We saw some sweeps. We saw this sort of stuff. And, you know, then the flip side of that was Ben Robson versus Sam Kay, which was, in my opinion, fight of the night. And those guys just tried to rip each other's fucking knees apart. And, you know, like you get these styles clashes. And I think that for sure, what's important to me is style, its ability, it's what's the popularity of this matchup. Is this matchup going to be a fan favorite? Where do we put it on the card? If you've got two guys that don't necessarily have the same popularity as others, but we know that it's going to be a great match, maybe we give it a different standing in the card and all these sorts of stuff go into it. Like matchmaking is to me extremely rewarding, but it is very complex.
I mean, that's kind of back to the initial starting point of this, of the whole integrity versus intention. And this, as much as you love what you're doing, you want the best of what you're going to get, is then also doing it in a format you want to be proud of, but also getting the respect it deserves. And that happy, like Venn diagram, happy medium of, okay, this is how we're going to present it. This is what I want it to be. This is my project. And then if someone pulls out, someone gets injured, it's then, okay, all my my plate spinning almost, this massive machine. Everything's very well organized. Now I need to find the exact cog, because I'm not just going to get someone out of the fucking crowd saying, "Oh, I'm putting a rash guard. It's 50 quid. Go sit down." No, it's you've got to try and find a suitable matchup and suitable kind of opponents. And again, the variety there. Like you take the last card, you had the 4-men tournaments for the lightweight, the featherweight and lightweight with
under 80 kilo and under 70 kilo. Yeah,
because you had Camille Will, Jay Butler, Ash
and Chris Newman.
Oh, I almost got the whole thing. And then you also had Ross, you had Sean Madonna,
Owen O'Flanagan, Sean McDonough, and Lloyd Cooper.
I mean, for anyone who doesn't know who those people are, I mean, you're missing out. I mean, if you've ever seen Owen and Ross, those guys, I think it was another one of those tournament ones, strangling things. It was what show was it? Was it Role Models? I think they had a 60-man tournament.
I forget.
There's so many, but yeah, like those guys. That's when I first saw them compete. I mean, it's just mental, and it's so entertaining to watch because as much as jiu-jitsu, some people say it's not marketable. It depends.
It does depend.
It depends on so many things. It depends on what. Ultimately, the most marketable thing of it is the more scrambling things, the more active, the more aggressive. Yeah, sitting down, getting a nice sweep is all very interesting, but it takes a while to establish the grips, get this, that, and the other. And yes, you get the odd sort of explosive tap, but from a complete layman's point of view, if you sit down, grab a leg, and get a tap from an inside heel hook, you don't know what you saw. But if you see like a scramble from a takedown, this, that, and the other, it's very visual, very in your face. Yeah, and it is interesting to hear. I don't know, developments in that. And with regards to the word development there, and so the first Pantheon showed like the combat jits, and then
submission striking is what we called it. Yeah.
Again, potato. I see a spade. I call it a spade.
Yeah.
Call it what you want. Regards of onwards from there, do you think of any other sort of rule sets you guys would like to, I don't know, play around with and try and get people involved with?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know is the answer. I think the thing that I would like to focus on the most at the moment is defining a submission-only rule set that works, right? And that has the least amount of holes as possible. Because if we look at ADCC, if we look at GrappleFest, if we look at EBI, if we look at Polaris, like all of them are submission-only shows, right? Well, ADCC not so much, but generally they try to push the rule set for a submission. All of them have holes, right? And of course, at the end of the day, Pantheon's rule set has holes as well, right? Like in the first couple of Pantheons, if there was no submission, it was a draw, right? Well, we had some feedback from people saying that it could be a draw, but there could have been a clear winner, right? Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that you're a loser? Like, because essentially a lot of the athletes will see a draw as a loss. Fine. So, what I would like to do at the moment is perfect as much as we can one rule set. And this is where I think having other shows like a GrappleFest, like a Polaris, like an EBI, all these sorts of things that are doing the same thing, endeavoring to take jiu-jitsu at a regional and a European and a global level to another stratosphere, these things are going to happen. And what I would like to do, I mean, of course, submission striking was Liam's baby. It was his idea. And the first iteration didn't go how we wanted to. And we did have conversations about, do we make it better? Do we spend some time in it? And et cetera, et cetera. But and again, me and Liam have these conversations frequently, but if I was the only director and I was just running things, what I would try to do is spend as much time as I can perfecting one rule set, perfecting the submission only rule set, listening to the athletes, taking things on board, watching our matches again, and looking to perfect it. So that's what I would like to try and do. Am I going to say we're never going to do submission striking or combat jits again? No, of course not. I mean, look, interesting things sell, right? And at the end of the day, when you're in a revenue business, you have to think about money. It has to be said, right? If we're going to be doing a GrappleFest or a Polaris with a behind closed doors show, we have to take this very seriously because there's no revenue that comes back. Zero, zilch, nothing. No merch, no brands, no sponsors, nothing. It just doesn't happen. No ticket sales, it doesn't happen. So if that's something that we're going to endeavor to do, then we have to take that seriously, right? So, at the end of the day, yeah, sorry, I'm wittering, but the end of my point is there is obviously a potential that we may bring other rule sets in, but for now, what's important to me is perfecting a submission only rule set.
And again, this kind of willingness to change and try new things. I mean, even being said initially where I start with this about the whole, I don't know, trying something different and how wrestling's the more marketable side, the more explosive kind of very observant. I don't know. Very. I'm thinking from a layman's perspective because again, the ideal world is all the jiu-jitsu athletes would all be the ones watching everyone, where the money comes from. But as well as anyone, a lot of jiu-jitsu people are quite tight when it comes to buying anything. It's always, can I have a sponsorship? Please sponsor me. It's like, okay, why don't you
for good reason.
Yeah,
for good reason.
Obviously, but most of the time, if you want to see from a business point of view, you got to think, okay, yeah, you train, you want representing this, that, and the other, but also business needs income. Whereas the money comes from the fans of the fighters, the friends of the fighters, the ones who are going to, also find an interest in this and then start. It's then trying to make it based around that because the whole knife edge is if you make it too short, nothing really happens. You make it too long, nothing happens. Whereas you make it the happy medium, a Goldilocks zone of, okay, this is enough time to work and get something, but not too long. You have to stall, and not too long this, that, and the other.
Of course. And, one of the things that, again, what we're trying to do at Pantheon is try to lock that down, right? And it seems like from a lot of what we're discussing with the fighters is that 10 minutes seems to be the sweet spot for a fight, right? For a match bout. 8 minutes seems to be a little bit too short when you've got high-level black belts. And 15 minutes is just too long. 20 minutes for Polaris is too long, right? Like a lot of guys are saying, it was interesting when Ash won his match against Richard Alicorn. I think it was that match. No, it was not that match. It was, oh Jesus, it could have been. I'm confusing my Polarises, but Manchakera for Edwin Najmi for the 170 title, right? And Edwin Najmi won that match, but afterwards on the mic, he said, man, 15, 20 minutes is too long. I can't go 100% for 20 minutes. He was like, give me an 8-minute match and I'll go 100% on somebody for the whole 8 minutes. No problem. I'll give you the match that you're looking for. And I think that's really important, right? You want a match that is going to be explosive. Gordon and Junior were going to have this no time limit sub-only match, right? And with Gordon, it's difficult. You're probably not going to make it 20 minutes, right? But let's say that match went 3 hours. Who's still watching? Nobody. Nobody's going to be still watching at 3 hour mark of a no time limit sub-only, right? So, of course, as you've rightly said, it's important to get a happy medium between too long, too short, but it's also important to get, something at Pantheon that we do is make stalling calls extremely quickly, right? Extremely quickly. And those calls will come quick and fast because we want action. Of course we do. The fans want action. Nobody wants to see you pass my guard and end up in side control and sit there for 8 minutes. Nobody wants to see that, right? I don't even want to see that. You don't want to see that, but you're going to win, right?
Mm.
So
that's draw.
Well, draw. Yeah, exactly.
But with that all being said as well, it goes back to our original points about how we market what we're doing. And again, as much as you might appreciate how good the match was, if you look at a thumbnail for a jiu-jitsu match, I don't know, Joe Blogs jiu-jitsu versus whoever, it could be the absolute match of the century. But if it's 3 hours, something long, you're thinking, do I have to sit through this?
Yep. Perceived effort, right? Absolutely.
And again, it's this whole happy medium between jiu-jitsu purists, the whole integrity of what it is we're trying to build, and the execution to try and keep it within that kind of business savvy, but also keeping it pure to what we're trying to give it, how you want it to be perceived. And now,
of course,
with all this being said, where can people find you and where can people find your podcast, my friend? Sure.
So, the podcast itself is, you can go to www.allaboutbalancepodcast.com. But to be honest, I wouldn't bother. Just look for All About Balance on any of the podcast vendors that you're looking for. iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, all that good stuff. It's all there. You can find me specifically at BJJ_Harry Powell. I'm pretty sure that's my handle. Let me just check that. Yes, it is. It is at BJJ_Harry Powell. You can find me on Instagram there. I will post about the matches that are coming up. You'll also see any jiu-jitsu related posts. You can find Pantheon Promotions at Pantheon Promotions, funnily enough. And again, look, we're always looking at trying to bring stuff out at the moment. Liam's recording these things called Troll Tuesdays, which is basically like troll techniques that you can just destroy your partner's ego with as and when we can roll again. So yeah, I mean, yeah, go and find me there, I guess. It's so weird, actually. It's so weird for me to say that stuff. Do you know what I mean? At the end of my podcast, I'm usually like, oh, where can people find you? And I'm like, shit, where can I find myself? I don't even know. But look, just before you close, I just want to say a massive, massive thank you to you specifically I mean, you've given me 2.5 hours of your time at this point, and I'm vastly grateful. I know that look, I know we spoke about during the podcast that numbers don't necessarily mean anything, but a man that has, essentially 4 times my following, it's a real honor for me to come onto your podcast. It's a real honor to be next to some of the names that you've had involved. And it was a real honor to share 2.5 hours of time with you. So honestly, thank you so much. Thank you. It's been really good.
And in that same vein, I really appreciate your time. Again, your 2.5 hours to listen to me waffle, and it's just I really enjoyed this one. And I've stopped recording there. All those can be in the description.